How dare you? How dare you, Ranger and Rogue, ask if I'm pooping? I've never pooped once in my life. Stand by that claim. Welcome to the Normal American Show, host Rob Noerr. Another Friday midday stream. Glad you all could be here. As every Thursday and Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern here in about 15 minutes, we will be doing an X Spaces, John Burk and I. The topic today is the ballot stuffing case that we saw in, where was it, like Connecticut, Bridgeport, New Connecticut. What does that say about potential elections being the most secure ever? You know, things like that. And also Trump's education plan, which I'll be honest, I haven't looked much into. I don't think I'd be a big fan of, but maybe I appreciate the spirit of it, but you have to be careful sort of with these things. So, is it Godzilla Day? Is it? How many Godzilla movies are there? 60? It's got to be approaching that, right? In the United States, we probably just look at like the English translation ones, but my guess is there's a bunch that probably aren't even dubbed here. Yeah, it's great to see everyone this morning. First one was 1954. Look at this. Red Hulk. Now, the Red Hulk was the Red Hulk. Red Hulk was bad, right? Like, that was one of the villains. Because you got Green Hulk, but then there's Gray Hulk. And I think Gray Hulk's like, yeah, okay, at first. Gray Hulk's like, it's like a less strong version of the Hulk, but he's got his wits about him, right? Like, he could talk like he's Banner, like the scientist. I think I'm right about that. And then Green Hulk's just exponential. Now I'm wrong? Okay. Well, whatever. I remember reading once, I don't know if this is true, but I remember reading once that the reason that the Hulk became green was because when he was first created, that was like a color that they had extra of, and they were like, oh, okay, we'll do green, that'll be cool. I don't know if that's true or not, but I could say it, and if anyone disagrees with me, you're banned! How about that? He had radiation which took away Hulk's strength. Okay. Yeah, was Red Hulk like the Colonel? Was that him? Did he become the Red Hulk? I don't know. You know, I used to be into comic books back in the day. I basically was only into the X-Men comic books like when I was in high school. Yeah, Thunderbolt Ross. That's what I thought. Yeah. But nowadays it just seems like, I don't know. I'm 40. I think if I read comic books, I should get punched in the stomach. Not really. I just don't know where, yeah. It seems like they're bastardizing old characters that maybe you liked. And don't get me wrong, a lot of it is this garbage woke agenda. I think you get a bunch of people that are writing for these that don't really care about the origins of the character. Like you saw that with the Witcher show. Like they're shitting on Henry Cavill because he's like, I actually read the source material and really like it. And I don't think the direction this show's going is like authentic to the source material. And they're like, shut up, you're difficult to work with. Like, yeah, God forbid you actually like these characters, you know. I think that if you want to be woke and you want to introduce diverse characters and stuff, again, I'm saying this as someone at the extreme peripheral end of this. I barely consume any of the media. You know, I think the way Spider-Man did Miles Morales, they're like, we want a black Spider-Man, but they basically created a new character that makes sense. I think that's legitimate, you know, as opposed to just being like, hey, Spider-Man's black now. You know, it's the same spiel, you know. But I also do think, in addition to the woke stuff, I think part of it, even without the woke stuff, is it's hard to keep telling stories about the same characters. Eventually things will fall off. It's one of the things, it's difficult to explain. It's like, you'll see a TV show that you like, and you know, there's this obvious movement. I don't even know if movement's the right word. There's something inherent in people when they like characters. They're likely to reconsume stories with those characters, even if there's a downfall in the quality of the story. So, like, that's why sequels are so big now. You know, because it's like, well, why create a whole new universe and a whole new story and all these new characters when we could just do another Indiana Jones movie? We could just do another Star Wars movie. You know, and there are a certain amount of people that will go see those movies, even if it's trash, even if it has nothing to do with the Star Wars universe. If you say it's a Star Wars film, people are like, oh, okay. and and then eventually, Guessing Forward at saying the Marvels will bomb, Brie Larson's a bad actress. No, it could be true. Eventually, it runs its course. I think people are getting tired of the MCU, and so you're going to start to see diminishing returns. China took Israel off their maps. Who knows? I think it's sort of woke pandering. It makes sense, too. We could talk about that a little. But I'm going to finish talking about garbage culture that no one wants to hear about. What's up, Webmaster? So I think that what happens then is you get unoriginal. Let's say there's a writer out there that has this really cool idea for these new stories and new characters, but that's not going to get greenlit by like a studio or by a major publishing company because they're like, we want to play it safe. We want characters that everyone knows because we think that that's a guaranteed market to sell. And so then maybe if you're those writers and you're like, okay, now I got to make my story and shoehorn in all of these Marvel characters or Star Wars characters, And I think that at that point, the art isn't what the artist envisioned totally, right? It's them having to make significant compromises, which I think leads to a worse story. Now, certainly it's also true that there's a lot of woke garbage that's going on as well. Yeah, I saw that Red Hulk. Now, I'll be well, thank you, Monster Throtatron 9000. I love you, Big Daddy. Wow. That's great, great praise coming from the Monster Throtatron 9000. Thank you so much. I think that I haven't, I'll be honest, I was really into, I thought the first Iron Man movie was awesome. I thought Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man was a great casting choice. I liked the first Captain America movie. What do they call it? Phase 1. I probably saw every movie up until the Avengers in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And then I missed a ton. But I did see the Avengers Age of Ultron. I didn't think it was that great. And then, I saw the original Miss Marvel movie. But that's it. And I saw Doctor Strange. But that's it. And I feel like at this point, it's like watching a TV series where it's like you missed, you watch season 1 and then you miss season 2 and season 3. And it's like, do I want to jump in and watch season 4? No. And that's how I feel. I just have no interest in any Marvel movie now. One, I think that even the ones I did see were declining in, how much I like them. But also it's just oversaturated and I don't want to have to watch, oh, did you catch the Easter eggs because you watched the She-Hulk show? No, I didn't watch the She-Hulk show. So for me, I don't know. It's oversaturated. They do this all the time. It's worse now with the Star Wars and the Marvel crap. But, it's like vampire movies and then zombie movies and then comic book. There's all of these, I don't know. Yeah, the short people. Well, you can thank Peter Dinklage for that, right? He was out there saying about how offensive it was casting, little people. Well, good for you, man. Now it's easy to say when you're a millionaire, but all the other little people actors, they're like, hey, shut up, Dinklage. We like these roles. I think it's it is funny. This might be kind of bigoted or racist, but I'll say it anyway. I don't mean it that way. It's funny if you watch movies with certain minorities that groups cast, like little people, there's only because that's a population of so few people, there's probably a very small percentage of them that are actors. So you're like, we need a little person to be a villain. Well, who you got? Warwick Davis, Peter Dinklage, only a handful of people. It's like that with Native American actors, right? If you see a movie with Native Americans, it's there's probably 100 Native American actors that are prominent. And so you see if you see 10 movies a year with Native Americans, you're probably going to see a lot of the actors oh yeah, I recognize that guy from this show. And even even character actors, if you go back and you watch a lot of the extras or the very minor roles in a movie like Gladiator, it's very similar. There's the same people that are in very similar roles in Braveheart, right? Because it's oh, we need a guy with a cool scar on his face that barely says anything. Yeah, we got a guy for that. I always thought that was interesting. And it's oh, that's bigoted to say that. Yeah, but if you're that dude with the scar on your face, you're screw all that. I'll take the work. I don't care, if you're a little person, you know, you upset that you're getting preference for all these roles? I don't think so. I'll be like, yeah. All right. John says he's starting space now. Now, if I may, please ask you. I'm going to put the link to the space once it starts. Once we get it. Please, someone from my audience, join the space and talk. Because once more today, what we're going to be talking about is the fact that John Burk and his audience hate Trump so much that if he wins the primary, they will not vote for him. And they would rather see him lose and Biden win than see a Trump presidency, because they really want a DeSantis presidency. And they think that if Trump wins in 2024, that hurts DeSantis in 2028. But if Trump loses in 2024, then that helps DeSantis in 2028. I'm tired of like carrying the torch myself. So if someone wants to join the space, I would absolutely thoroughly enjoy if we get to that conversation, because part of what we're going to be talking about is Trump's education plan. And I'm worried that it's going to burn some bridge. I'm not really worried. All I can do is be myself. You know, it's a... Okay. All right. Now I got to do stuff. Let's see if I can get this done. So I've tried to set this up. We'll see. John can't host it, so I have to host. But I can only host via phone because it's super weird. I don't know why it's like that. No. Let me see what I got here. So I got this thing called BlueStacks that lets me basically emulate a mobile phone on my computer so that hopefully I could host a space. So John's having problems hosting the space right now. So I'm going to try to host it. Spam. No, thank you. Spaces. Let's do a space. Well, let's see. What did John have it titled as? So give me a second. Oh, what's going on? Oh, why won't it? Are you kidding me? Ballot harvesting and federalized education from Trump. Okay. Start my space. I typed in John. It says John's seen it. No, I'm not trying. All right, give me a second. I'm trying to work out the details here, so let's see if this works. Hey, what's up, everyone? You all should still be able to hear me here. We're starting this space, trying to get some bugs worked out. Welcome to John Burk and robnoerr Spaces. We do this every Thursday and Friday. I understand it might take some people some time to fill in here. Normally, John Burk's the host and I'm the co-host. I'm hosting for the first time due to some technical issues, so I got to get John in here as the co-host. I'm unfamiliar with hosting and exactly how to set people up with permissions and all of that stuff, so we try our best to do that. Also, weirdly enough, I don't know why they have done this with X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, but I find it very strange that right now you can only host on mobile. So I'm trying to host via my computer through an app that lets me emulate sort of a mobile experience. So we'll see how that works. Hopefully it ends up working all right. And, you know, I think John will be in here. Let's see if I can give John co-hosting privileges. How does Rob do that? Give me 1 second. Let's see. Co-host. Invite co-host. Now, John, I think if you could hear me, I think I should have invited you as a co-host. Now, if you're one of the few people that are listening right now, when you have the most talented political commentators in the country, such as John and I, there has to be some sort of deficit. And I think that deficit comes into the fact that we're not the most technologically proficient people. So give us a little leeway there, and I think you'll really like the discussion. So we'll give some people some time to go ahead and get on in here. All right, there we go. John is a speaker. John, I think I invited you as a co-host, if you could hear me.
Yeah, you got me?
Yeah. Did you get the co-host invitation?
Well, yeah, I mean, as long as I can speak, I think we're golden. Okay. I'm in the back roads right now, walking back to the house, getting the morning jog done, but
good deal.
I couldn't host a space the bandwidth wouldn't allow.
Well, let me ask you this, John, before we get into like the actual topic, because we should give people some time to get in. If you're listening, by the way, please retweet, because one of the things is because John normally hosts it, we got to make sure that the people in John's audience actually see that we're doing the space today. So we had the old John Burk link to the spaces. It's going to be a new spaces. It's via my channel now. So we'd really appreciate if you're listening, if you could retweet this out, that'd be great. But yeah, John, I think it's frustrating. Maybe I'm wrong, but you can only host via mobile. Isn't that the way it is right now? Maybe, hopefully I didn't.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I've checked on desktop. There's nothing there. A lot of the stuff just revolves around the app itself.
Yeah, and I found this emulator that lets me emulate a mobile device on my computer, so that's how I'm hosting it right now, and it seems to be fine. It seems to be working fine, so we'll give people a chance to get in here. Now, I think it's funny, John's out for a jog right now, which I know every morning he's always very active doing stuff like that. Literally, I might break one of my cardinal rules here, because as soon as we're done streaming today, I have to actually go and do stuff with my family, so they might actually be bringing me a sandwich, which I never eat on these things. But I might be. So John's exercising and I'll be eating, which is basically on point for John and I. I will say this, John, I thought about this. I'm always trying to come up with stupid incentives to get in shape. And I've been doing better. I lost a decent amount of weight. I'm doing better. But at some point, I'm going to challenge you to an in real life, some sort of physical competition. And then I'll no doubt get my ass kicked. But that'll motivate me to try to do a little better.
What? Bro, I will 100%. If it incentivizes you to keep pushing, absolutely, my man. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it'd be great.
I think the spirit of competition drives us all to excel.
Honest to goodness, that's like, people ask me why I joined debate when I was in college. This is a real story. I went to this university, Clarion University, and I wanted to play football. So I'm like 5'8", and I was an okay high school player on a bad team and a single A division. So, I mean, I would have been peripheral if I tried really hard for 4 years, maybe getting on special teams on a small college. When I went to my first football meeting at Clarion University, I sat next to a guy who I would later know his name was Reggie Wells. Reggie was like the first player from Clarion University to get drafted in the NFL. He was actually a lineman for the Arizona Cardinals, and I believe he made several Pro Bowls. So I looked at that dude and was like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to make the cut here. So I joined debate because I'm a competitive asshole, and at least that was somewhere where I could be competitive. So that's how my foray into debate started, just being competitive, so...
I love it. I mean, that's why I enjoy doing these spaces with you. You definitely deserve a much larger following. You're an expert at this kind of stuff. And it's commendable to watch how you debate these people, how you take them on. You don't fall back. You don't retreat. You take on some of the biggest streamers out there. And why you don't have a bigger following is beyond me. I really don't know. I think it's bullshit. I think other streamers, other debaters, other right-leaning political pundits, however big or small, should have been promoting you for the longest time, because you're definitely an ace in the hole. I don't understand how they don't see this, but that just shows lack of sight on their part. Well, but let's get this thing started, brother.
Yeah, because that's worth talking about.
The stuff you showed me was like incredible.
Yeah, and that's worth talking about at some point. I know that you've had a fight with a lot of people. I think there's a lot of grifters in this space. I think there's a lot of people that just
right, absolutely, yes, 100%.
And so that I think people like me and you, one of the reasons that maybe we don't have a bigger following is because You could criticize us in a million ways, and we both deserve it a lot. I guarantee it. We're not perfect, but we're telling you what we really think. And a lot of times that doesn't make it the best playmate for other people. They don't want someone that's going to disagree with them 30% of the time, and so they'd rather just ignore you.
I feel like a political prophet, my man, because I want to say, like, man, as far back as like 2018, 2017, I was going after Kirk. I was going after Turning Point. I was saying, like, these guys, I was warning people, like, they are not conservatives. They are not what you think they are. This whole shtick they have going on is a power play, a money grab to get closer to Trump, to get closer to the White House, to Mar-a-Lago. And with Kirk tweeting out what he did yesterday in regards to federalized education, but it's okay when Trump does it, I'm like, finally people are waking up that this is not a small government movement. This is not a conservative movement. This is a populist movement. And it's so annoying, but I'm glad people are waking up and seeing this.
Yeah, and again, what the irony is, I don't know that I'm the most conservative person in the world. I do consider myself more of a populist, but that's okay because I'm upfront with it, right? Like, I tell people exactly what I think. But we have two topics to get to today. However, as we're getting started here, this is your show as much as ours. The entire point of a Spaces is to get as many voices that want to contribute as possible. We are brash people. If we disagree with you, we'll let you know. Sometimes we may even raise our voice, but we welcome all voices on this topic. We want to make sure you get your input. So if you're out there and you think that you need some special talent to contribute to the conversation, trust me, you don't. We're all normal people. We would welcome people. So please retweet the Spaces and go ahead and ask permission to be a speaker if you have something to say. And if you want to take the topic in a different direction, that's okay too. But to start with, the story that I thought was...
retweets help. If they can retweet the space, that would help drastically.
Absolutely. So we hope that you retweet the space as well. So the story here I have from townhall.com. I'll read a little of it. Democratic primary result thrown out after video of ballot stuffing surfaces. And this is from yesterday. A Connecticut judge was forced to throw out the results of a Democratic mayoral primary after surveillance video showed possible ballot stuffing that a local judge said rendered the court unable to determine a legitimate result. This week, Superior Court Judge William Clark ordered a new Democratic primary due to the misconduct. He claimed the number of tampered ballots found changed the result of the original election, according to NBC. Quote, the volume of ballots so mishandled is such that it calls the result of the primary election into serious doubt and leaves the court unable to determine the legitimate result of the primary, Clark wrote in his ruling, adding that the videos are, quote, shocking to the court and should be shocking to all parties. Now, I thought this was an interesting story for two reasons. One, anytime, no matter how small an election, that there is actual fraud that occurs, I think that it's important to us as Americans because we need to have an election system that we could trust. That's how our voice is heard. But secondly, in lieu of so many accusations of 2020 and 2022 of particularly people connected to Trump or MAGA type people or conservatives in general that have lost faith in our election system, have made all sorts of accusations, does this paint a bigger picture that perhaps things like ballot stuffing was more common than we at first believed? So, John, I'd like to give you the first word. What do you think about this story, and what do you think about the connection to sort of other elections?
Not surprising. I think it's definitely going to call into question the election result of 2020. There's no doubt about that. I mean, why wouldn't it? If you see Democrats doing it against their own, certainly they're going to do it more towards us. But the biggest thing that I wish people would really focus on is the idea of in-person voting. The mail-ins, all this other stuff, the drop boxes, they need to go away. We've seen it so many times abused, manipulated, and used for personal advantages in this election cycle. This needs to end. Like, this really needs to end.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think, it's a difficult thing, right? Because I think oftentimes what happens is people look at things in sort of a two-dimensional way, and sometimes they lose sight of like how multiple things could be true at a time. I think that when Republicans specifically opened the door to ballot harvesting, it was because of COVID. At least, I'm speaking from experience in my state of Pennsylvania, where I had a small radio show. I was interviewing a lot of state politicians, and a lot of them were Republicans that ended up voting for, the bill that allowed for the massive changes in how we do elections, ballot harvesting, and things like that. It was a huge mistake. It's a huge mistake because even if there's not fraud committed, you have to understand that this is going to be an incredible benefit to Democrats because Democrat voters are centered in more high population areas, especially in a state like Pennsylvania. So if you allow ballot harvesting, such as one person to go to, an apartment complex and say, hey, here's a bunch of ballots, everyone, or you got ballots mailed to you, I'll collect them all and I'll drop them off at the drop box for you. That's always going to benefit people that are a more centralized location. It certainly opens the door to fraud so much more. And I think it also eliminates something that maybe we could talk about this, John. It's not a popular thing to say, but I think there should be some minimal barriers to voting. I don't think that it's like, if you're uninformed that you should be voting. You should be allowed. You should legally be allowed. But I think the barrier of having to, at the very least, get your ass up and go to the polling station, unless you're disabled or you're a veteran and you're not in the area, and you requested an absentee ballot. But I think that should be the bare minimum. Because if you care so little that you can't even make it 10 minutes to your polling station to vote, what is that vote really doing? Is it a vote that's been well thought out for the benefit of this country? I don't think so. But although I agree that we need to end ballot harvesting, I also think that we need to criticize the RNC and Trump and his team for not taking advantages of the rules as they're set forth. So as we should be moving to eliminate ballot harvesting, but we should also, in the meantime, be taking advantage of it. That's why I like someone like Scott Presler, because he's out there trying to get people to register to vote early. He's out there trying to get people to request mail-in ballots. He's out there trying to do ballot harvesting in legal ways across these states. And as always, as we talked about yesterday, John, the best chance to change culture or change laws that benefit these authoritarian lefties if they fall victim to the very rules that they seek to impose on you. So with cancel culture, they'll never change until they're canceled. With ballot harvesting, it'll never change until ballot harvesting starts to benefit constitutional conservatives. Then all of a sudden they'll be like, oh, geez, this is a bad idea.
Yeah, and then they're just going to go ahead and change the game again. They'll figure out something else, some minority to try and target to say, like, look, if you're in opposition to this, you must hate black people. If you're in opposition to this, you must hate disabled people. This is what they do. It's always utilizing somebody that's some kind of victim. How they're victims, I have no idea. But that's what they're going to do. It's like, look, if you don't support this, you must therefore hate such and such. And that's what they surround their arguments in every single time. And Republicans keep falling for it. Again, Trump's actions have been just appalling to me as a leader. And you're sitting there saying, like, hey, don't worry about showing up to vote. All these other things, talking about not using it. Meanwhile, I see Scott Presler, like you say, this guy's out there getting after it. How does he feel? How does he feel when the supposed quote-unquote leader of the party is undermining all of his work, discrediting it? It's like, I think, quite honestly, nobody's done more for Trump's campaign than Presler, quite honestly, or just the GOP in general. And if you care about the GOP, if you care about the party, if you care about winning, don't undermine what he's done, It doesn't make sense to me. But this is Trump. Trump's ego. He's very ego-driven. He's like, we're going to win it no matter what. It's like, it doesn't work that way, dude. You haven't won anything since 2016. We got to play by their rules, but don't be surprised when they go around and try and change the rules. They'll figure something else out to help some kind of disabled, minority, disenfranchised persons and say, well, now we have to apply these rules because what about them? It's like, look, life sucks. Get your ass up, go vote. There's no other way.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think that, obviously Trump has blame. I think the RNC has blame as well. Ronna McDaniel is running the RNC. A lot of these specific Republican leadership in specific states, like here in Pennsylvania, everyone's dropping the ball on this. I hope, again.
How the hell does Ronna McDaniel still have a job? How? I don't get this.
I have no clue. Well, I do know how, right? Because it's not about winning. To them, Ronna McDaniel represents a different failure than maybe Trump, which is she's a failure on the part of the uniparty. She's a failure on the part of the old school, neocon class of conservative. I mean, she's a Romney. That's what she represents. And they don't really care about winning elections. That wing of the Republican Party would rather see Donald Trump lose and be buried and have Hillary Clinton president for the next 8 years, if that was possible, than actually have to come to terms with the fact that they would lose some sort of position of power within the Republican Party. So they're always jockeying for position to make sure that they remain the big dogs in charge of the runner-ups. That's what they want. They want to be big fish in a small pond, because at the end of the day, Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton have more in common than Jeb Bush and Ron DeSantis or Jeb Bush and Donald Trump. And so they would rather see, some establishment lefty one. So that's why it doesn't change. That's why Ronna McDaniel's not there for me and you. Yeah, to us, it doesn't make sense. It's like, well, wait a minute. There's people like me and John and a bunch of people listening in this space. We want to see the Republicans win. We are tired of sort of the authoritarianism. We're tired of the, woke culture of the left that's dominating everything. We want to start to get some victories. That's not their constituents. Their constituents are the donors. Their constituents are the lobbyists that are giving them money. And they're more than happy to, quote, lose, as long as that means that someone with real power won't come up within the Republican Party and challenge the current orthodoxy. And it's even more glaring when you look at, I've talked about this. It's like, at this point, it's beating a dead horse. But here in Pennsylvania, everyone rightfully criticizes Trump for endorsing Dr. Oz. And it was stupid to do so. But what people don't realize is this is a blunder on Trump in a different way, because it turns out that Dr. Oz wasn't even close to the most Trumpian type person that was running. Dr. Oz is a milquetoast, average sort of neocon, old school type Republican. He's right in line with like a George W. Bush. That's who he was. Trump, he's not really thinking necessarily, oh, who's most like me? Trump's literally trying to pick the people he thinks will win. That way he could say, see, I took them over the finish line, which just isn't true. But that's what he was trying to do. But it's not that Oz lost because Trump appointed him. Oz lost because he's terrible, because he doesn't connect with Republican voters, many of which embrace the message of MAGA, embrace sort of the more populist conservative movement. They felt left down. They weren't enthused, even though Trump, and I think that goes to show that the movement's bigger than Trump. They felt let down. Like, why would Trump support him? And I forget the woman's name that was running. She did my show, though, but she was awesome. She was like this total populist. Despite the fact that Trump and the RNC appointed Dr. Oz, the person that lost to him by 0.5% was this guy, Dave McCormick. Dave McCormick doesn't even live in Pennsylvania. He's like this hedge fund millionaire that lives in Connecticut, right? Dave McCormick lost by 0.5%. So after Dr. Oz loses to John Fetterman, what does the RNC in Pennsylvania do? They don't change anybody in a position of leadership in the RNC. And now for the next Senate race, they are just pushing forth Dave McCormick again. It is literally the exact same plan with the exact same people. And if you're like me, and people on my show have watched me, I criticize people like county commissioners that have done my show, or people at the state level RNC that have done my show. And they get furious with me because I'm like, listen, if it has to be to keep all of you or get rid of all of you, I would get rid of every single one of you. If that's the two options I have. Why is there no introspection within your groups? Why aren't you out there embracing ballot harvesting, telling people that they need to sign up to register to vote early and get mail-in ballots, and doing your best to go into communities trying to get as many votes as possible, instead of just grumbling, oh geez, we shouldn't have mail-in voting. You're right, we shouldn't, but that's because you once more dropped the ball. You're the people that voted for it. And so I couldn't agree with you more. We have these people that claim to be in positions of leadership in the Republican Party, whether it be the Trump wing or the old school neocon wing, and none of them are doing anything to sort of affect the actual criminality, the alleged fraud and things like that come up, or embracing that system to say, fine, two could play at that game. If anyone would like to join speaker, just request position to speak, and I'll make sure to get you on there. Bear with me just a little. I'm new to this, but I think I could figure it out. It doesn't look that difficult. Another thing that I wanted to say, referencing this, is it's obvious that this is going to draw a comparison, this case in Connecticut, to movies like 2000 Mules, where we saw pictures that looked extremely shady of people stuffing ballot boxes and things like that. In general, the first thing I want to say is this, and I always try to give credit to someone if I think that they said something that I'm cribbing from them. So this credit goes to Scott Adams, though it is something that I thoroughly believe, and don't get mistaken, I don't agree with Scott Adams on everything, but I think that he's right about this. What Scott Adams said is the chance that there was significant fraud in the 2020 election, given the stakes that literally the Democrats were saying that Trump was Hitler and things like that, and people are human and they're going to do things to stop what they see as this greatest evil that the country's ever done, that the chances of some sort of significant fraud are probably close to like 90 or 100%. However, the chance of each specific story that you hear being true are close to 0%. Well, how does that make sense? Well, that's because with social media, it's so easy for anyone to misidentify something and say it's fraud, or intentionally lie to you and say, this is fraud. And so the thousands upon thousands of stories that you're seeing that's like, oh, look, here's a picture of this woman doing that. That might not actually be fraud. But in general, if a few of those are fraud, then that would mean that the system was fraudulent, at least in a statistically significant way, even if not enough to change the results of the election. So I thoroughly believe that there was some amount of fraud, and maybe a lot of this ballot harvesting that occurred that we saw in places like 2000 Mules was accurate. I believe there are people that will take advantage. If you have the stakes so high that you think if the other side wins, it's the end of the country, and you have a system that's easy enough to potentially cheat, someone will eventually cheat, even if they didn't in 2020. It's inevitable that it's going to happen. The reaction by the establishment is what lets me believe that there actually was significant cheating. Because instead of admitting this and saying, sure, in an election where we massively changed state after state after state and how they voted for the first time, it clearly makes sense that there would be people that would try to take advantage of this. And it clearly makes sense that even if there wasn't fraud, there would be more mistakes and more ballots rejected. It just makes sense. Like, anytime we see that there's been mass mail-in voting, even if you take fraud out of the equation, we have far more ballots that are rejected than if there's in-person voting. So you would think then, when you have states like Pennsylvania that for the first time is opening up to mail-in voting in such a massive scale, that there would be more rejected because there's growing pains. And this is taking out the question of fraud. This is just, well, people make mistakes when they're mailing the ballot in. They put the wrong address. They put the wrong date. They don't fill out the right cards. When you go in person and you have questions about these ballots, normally there's people there to help you through it. And so they make sure that your ballot's approved when it goes through. So without that, you would expect a higher rejection rate. But instead of that, and we could also see that studies show that mail-in's easy to commit fraud. But instead of the establishment taking that criticism seriously and saying, you're right, there probably was more fraud, more rejections and things like that. However, we don't see any evidence that it was enough to turn the tides of the election in any of these specific states. Instead, what did they tell you? That's an insurrection. You can't talk about it. It was, and I'm quoting now, the most secure election ever. And so when you see then that a judge in Connecticut sees in the Democratic primary, we see video almost identical that we saw in 2000 Mules where people are stuffing ballots and this judge says, I'm appalled by this. We have to redo this election. All of a sudden it seems laughable that we were told elsewhere, oh, no, you can't, not only can you not question this, it's literally the most secure election ever. Let's see, we got Surian. Go ahead. I know Surian from my channel. It's great to hear from you. Go ahead if you'd like to go ahead and speak.
Hey, Rob, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Great. Well, I'm obviously one of your biggest fans on Twitter, probably right behind Aftershock, but I am calling because I do have a bone to pick with you. Yesterday, you called DeSantis pathetic because of his comments on they were interviewing him, I think it was on MSNBC, and Willie Guys asked him about Trump and stuff like that. And my question to you is, what did you expect him to say? I mean, again, I like Trump, and at this point, I'm kind of leaning more towards DeSantis, but if Trump were to do the nomination and DeSantis were to get it, I would vote for DeSantis. But my point is, I don't understand what you wanted DeSantis to say about what he said besides. So can you elaborate on that?
Yes, absolutely. So it's a fair question. Like, first, let me say at this point, although yesterday did that interview I didn't like of DeSantis, I still, if I had to vote in the primary today, would vote for DeSantis. I'll be completely forthright with everyone. I am a single issue voter. That issue is, I think our institutions are corrupt, and until that corruption is solved or dealt with in a significant way, then everything that we talk about on specific issues are unimportant. For example, if I'm right that the system is corrupt and unelected bureaucrats in the FBI, the State Department, the IRS, the EPA, in collusion with institutions outside of government like corporate interest, academia, etc., are really running the show, if Ron DeSantis gets in there and is ineffective at dealing with that corruption, they will stymie his administration. They will mar him down in corruption investigation after corruption investigation. People in his own party won't pass his agenda. For example, if he tries to secure the border, people within his own party, the neocon people will go, no, and they'll withhold it. And that would mean that even if we think that DeSantis is the best candidate, because of this corruption, he would be ineffectual. And this is how I feel like throughout. My favorite politician ever is Ron Paul. Ron Paul couldn't even get a foot in the door because of this corruption, because there is these institutions that seek to maintain their control over power. So I want a president that has the best plan to deal with that corruption. Donald Trump in 2016 was the best we had because I think it's two parts. One, you have to expose the corruption, which Trump did. Trump didn't expose the corruption by playing 4D chess. That's bullshit. Trump was actually kind of dumb in a lot of how he went about this, and he underestimated the level of corruption. He exposed the corruption by merely being someone that was a potential outsider. And so the corrupt institutions like the FBI outed themselves by illegally spying on them. The media that pretended, at least many normie people thought that they were somehow a little bit impartial, they exposed themselves as just being agents for these institutions designed to take down anyone that disagreed with them. And so that was good of Trump, not because he did anything, just because he existed and he ran and he won. The bad part was Trump didn't do anything about the corruption. Trump claimed to drain the swamp, but he appointed people like John Bolton. Trump could have done all kinds of things. He could have pardoned Julian Assange. He could have released the unclassified documents showing the coup against him with Russiagate and stuff like that. He didn't. Instead, he ends up leaving fecklessly, only pardoning the people that Democrats wanted him to, and not really accomplishing much of substance in draining the swamp, right? So now I'm looking at who's going to be a better candidate in 2024 to drain the swamp, DeSantis or Trump. And there's pros and cons of each, which if people want, I could get into it. But what I'm looking for from DeSantis is having a credible plan, or at least paying lip service to how corrupt these institutions have been. And so what I want from DeSantis in that interview, I don't think DeSantis has to like Trump as a person. I don't have a problem if DeSantis comes out and says, look, this a-hole and his people have made personal attacks against me and my wife, not attacks against my record, not attacks against what I might do, but made personal attacks against me and my family. And I don't like it. And I don't have to like this guy. And I personally don't care if he's being negatively affected as a person. I wouldn't expect him to say that part, but I expect that's how he believes. However, what I do want for him, when someone says, well, would you vote for a person that's, found guilty in all these trials? The number one thing he needs to say immediately is, these are show trials. This is a system that from the day that Trump walked down that escalator, not because he was Donald Trump and this really smart guy, but because he was seen as a potential outsider, that they attacked in unprecedented ways. They engaged in a coup against him. They have launched lawsuit after lawsuit and criminal investigation after criminal investigation, every one of which is a blatant double standard, which we can see other Republican and way more Democrats that have done the same thing, like mishandling classified info or failing to pay, to correctly identify campaign expenditures, all of these things. And so that's what I expected him to say. I expected him to say, like, look, I'm not going to sit here and hold Trump's hand and say that I think he's a great guy or anything. We're engaged in a campaign. I think he's going below the belt in many things he says. But this isn't about me and Trump. It's about a two-tiered system that is literally weaponizing itself in unprecedented ways to go after what they see as opposition to the establishment. And I refuse to accept the premise of this question. You're going to sit here and say, oh, but wouldn't it be dangerous to elect someone that did some of these horrible things? How dare you? Wouldn't it be dangerous to elect someone like Joe Biden that weaponized these institutions for these phony baloney trials in the first place? That's what his answer should have been. And the fact that his answer wasn't, what faith do I then have? It diminishes my faith that if DeSantis gets in there, he's going to dismantle this corruption, right? Because if he's like, well, because of my personal animus towards Trump, or because I don't think it's that corrupt, in both scenarios, if he's willing to let them off the hook for being this corrupt because of that, what faith do I have that my issue will be withheld if he's the person that's ultimately elected? Now, make no mistake about it. I'm still probably going to vote for DeSantis in the primary, and certainly, even if I would vote for Trump in the primary, I'm absolutely going to vote for DeSantis in the general election if DeSantis would win. But I'm just saying it's troubling because just like Trump, when Trump did his interview with Tucker Carlson, like he's sitting there like, oh, Gavin Newsom's actually a good guy. And, when it came to COVID and blah, 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 blah. And actually, Cuomo did better on COVID than DeSantis. What faith do I have that he's going to do the right thing then? If he thinks that Newsom and Cuomo were good guys with COVID, what's that mean he's going to govern as? So, that's the type of things I'm looking at, sort of, and, maybe the counter argument to that, and maybe John would say this, I'll give him a chance here. Maybe it's, well, DeSantis can't just come right out and say, yeah, screw these systems because he needs to get moderate voters. Maybe. That could absolutely be true.
That's exactly what I thought, because again, I'm right with you 100%. Trump, I equate it to being almost like you see there's a hole there and you think there's a snake there because you see bones all around that hole, but you can't really completely say that there's a snake because you haven't seen it. But then Trump goes by and the snake comes out and bites at it. And you go, there's a snake. So that's what I think Trump did. We all knew that there was a lot of deep state stuff and a lot of, corrupt stuff that was going on. But it forced them to come out of that hole and attack Trump. And now you see it. So and anybody with any 2 cents of common sense can see it now. So I agree in that part. And I also agree that he failed. He should have pardoned Julian Assange. He should have released all those FBI documents and all that stuff. And that's on him. And that's something that's going to hurt him. But I think DeSantis, if I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, maybe he wants to do these things and, go after the FBI and do all this things. But he can't say it because he knows he can't get all of Trump MAGA people. So maybe he's trying to go a different way to get more votes. So that's what I think his rationality is behind that statement.
It could be, but here's the problem, right? Like as someone who's basically the best I have at ever fighting corruption is Trump, who at best did 50% of the job, which is a failing grade, right? As far as I'm concerned, he exposed corruption, but he didn't really do anything. And people that have watched my show, honest to goodness, I've had this conversation many, many times. If my issue is corruption, which it is, and I'm telling you that, you have to honestly ask, and if you're a Trump supporter, don't get it twisted. I would still vote for Trump. That's not what I'm saying. But you have to legitimately ask yourself this question. Would we have less blatant corruption today had Hillary Clinton won in 2016 than Donald Trump? Because it seemed that the corruption was incremental at that point. They were slowly gearing up, the old frog in the boiling water theory. Once 2016 happened, it was mask off. It was, we're just going to blatantly lie. The mainstream media is just a tool of the institutions now. We're going to investigate Trump. They literally spied on the president of the United States using bogus information. I can't stress this enough. The accusation that justified them spying on the president of the United States is, well, maybe he's trying to get dirt on his opponent from Russians. And the evidence they used to spy on him was Hillary Clinton actually getting dirt on Trump from Russians. They literally took the crime they were accusing Trump of and allowed Hillary to do it to investigate Trump. That would be like if you're like, I'm going to break into my opponent or my neighbor's house and rob them to prove that they robbed me. It's insane. And it was there in national light for every single American and everyone around the world to see. And you know what? They got away with it. And the large portion of blame, the biggest portion of blame as to why they got away with it is Donald Trump himself. Because he could have taken steps to immediately declassify all this stuff to show the American people, but instead he trusted people like Bill Barr. And they waited out the clock until it was too late. Now, the FBI and these institutions can't believe their good luck. Oh, we could just blatantly lock up political opposition. We could send the FBI to pro-life people's houses, 18 FBI agents with guns, and arrest them in front of their children. Meanwhile, pro-choice people could literally vandalize, beat up, do whatever they want to pro-choice centers. We could literally lock up people January 6th that didn't commit any violent crimes whatsoever. Meanwhile, we turn a blind eye to like lawyers that are firebombing police in the name of Black Lives Matter. Like, it's all out in the open now, and there is never any consequences. So much so that a representative, Jamal Bowman, could commit the very same crime that they're locking up peaceful January 6 people for, obstructing an official proceeding. He literally on camera pulls a fire alarm, blatantly lies about what he did, and there's zero consequences. $3,000 fine for a millionaire, and it's expunged for his record in 3 months. Oh boy. So the idea that, Trump actually did anything about this, there's a serious argument to be made. Maybe we would have been better off if Trump, when it came to fighting corruption, wasn't elected in 2016, and maybe we get someone in 2024 that was different. Maybe we get a DeSantis, maybe we get a Rand Paul, or someone like that. But the point I'm bringing up, how that alludes to DeSantis is, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me 5,000 times, shame on me. And so how am I supposed to trust? It's a difficult sell for me that's like, oh, trust us, Rob. DeSantis is really going to go after this corruption. He just can't verbalize it right now before the election. But just trust him. When it comes to after the election, he'll do it. Maybe that's true. He's the best chance I have probably right now, so I'm going to vote for him. But that's no guarantee. And it's difficult for me to then be like, well, you can't actually take their words at face value because there's some coded message that you have to listen to. I'm sorry, but that's not my job to do. And hopefully I'm wrong. Or, hopefully, I'm not saying definitively, but hopefully that's what happens. Hopefully DeSantis would then go on to win the primary, go on to win the general, and be like, okay, it's time to get to business. Now we're going to deal with these corrupt investigations. Now we're going to deal with the corrupt people at the FBI. But it's hard for me to just say, oh, that's what he really means when he's saying like, well, I guess I raised my hand, so I guess I'd still have to support Trump. But I don't think the Republicans would nominate him after that. Instead of being like, yeah, this was corrupt. I think Trump's a crappy candidate, but this is corruption of the highest level.
Well, that's the fear that I have with DeSantis is that, like you alluded to many times before, is he people whispering in his ear, well, you gotta tone it down, you gotta be more moderate, because that's the only way you're gonna win. And it's scary because, yeah, you're right. I mean, all we have to go is on your word. I can't read your mind. I can't do anything like that. So I have to go what you're saying. So I understand that. The problem that I see also is that these people are now emboldened, and because they got away with it. So now they're like, oh, you saying we can do all this stuff, spy and do all that, and nothing's going to happen to us? And not only that, we're going to have hacks like Pisco go out there and defend us to tooth and nail to the point of sounding ridiculous. That's where things get scary. Because now, what do you do then?
Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't know, John, I know is having trouble with the reception, but if John wants to get in here and sort of give your thoughts on sort of DeSantis, and if you think that he'll go after corrupt institutions like the FBI or weaponization of these institutions, or I would love to get some other people involved. I know we have a lot of big DeSantis fans in the space, so if anyone would like to speak, just go ahead and ask permission and we'll get you in here. But John, are you with us? If not, we could, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I've been listening. I've been eating my breakfast and just listening to what y'all have to say. I'm with Rob to a degree. I think, on that stage when they were talking about, who would raise their hand in support of Trump, yeah, and DeSantis kind of was like, people took that as like him kind of pausing. Yeah, it didn't look good on him. I was like, look, man, and here's the thing. Even if he said he wouldn't, I'm cool with that, but don't fence sit on this one. Choose a side. But I think DeSantis is learning this as he goes. Will he actually investigate these institutions? I can't sit there. The one thing I don't like doing is engaging in a lot of these DeSantis praise spaces to where it's just nothing but kissing DeSantis' ass and there's no criticisms whatsoever. I think that's very disingenuous to an actual cause. But do I think DeSantis would actually investigate these organizations? I would have to go based upon his track record in Florida, and I think he would. I think any man that will literally stand up against the COVID lockdowns and the mandates that were pushed forward by the federal government and go against not just Trump, not just America, but the entire world. Any man that'll take on Disney for a Marxist agenda, that's someone who I say that, look, he's not afraid. But what I will not do is position myself here to say, he's going to end the Fed, he's going to end the IRS. I don't know. I doubt it. I sincerely doubt it because I know that's just a very connected chain right there. But do I think DeSantis would take the fight to the enemy? Yeah, I would. He's done it in Florida. He's been doing it in Florida. He continues to do it. So I don't see any reason why he wouldn't. But then again, like I said, I'm not going to sit there and turn around and preach the gospel our savior DeSantis. I don't know. All I can go is by his previous actions. His previous actions do impress me. We see this guy getting Americans out of Israel as a governor. As a governor, he does more than the federal government. As a governor, these are marks of quality leadership, in my opinion. I can respect these things, but also draw the line in the sand to where I'm not going to worship the man. But based upon what I see, I like what I see. In comparison to Trump, Rob is right. Trump sat there and he bitched and he whined about all this corruption. It was just kind of his rallying cry was drain the swamp. And that's what really stemmed in this whole conspiracy theorism thing that now the right is just really inundated with. Is the QAnon insanity and stuff like that. It's not a swamp. It's corruption. It's corruption at the highest level. Call it what it is, because the swamp talk leads into this whole thing of who drops. It's just hand in hand with QAnon. But the thing that I want to see from DeSantis to go out there and attack these institutions, I like the point you made, Rob, as far as the education system. He's already done that. He's fought against the CRT being pushed into the Floridian schools. I can respect that. So he's got the marks there. And that's why I think Trump isn't going to debate DeSantis. I was listening to another space earlier this morning.
And I agree with what a lot they had to say as far as why Trump will not engage with DeSantis. We saw DeSantis' most recent interview. I think he's getting more in touch with his fighting side. He talks about how Trump doesn't have the balls to come at him. And he's right. And it's not from one of these things of like rhetoric. It's one of these things that if Trump steps foot on that debate stage against Ron DeSantis and the topic of COVID is approached, Trump will get shredded. He will lose the election. Trump, he's not he's not backing down from DeSantis on the debate stage because he's 50 points up. Trump is scared. Trump is scared. He knows if DeSantis takes him to the mat in a debate over COVID, he will get slaughtered. There is no doubt about that. The entire country, even Trump's own MAGA base, knows Trump was wrong. But when DeSantis on the national stage that will be internationally watched shreds Trump, he will plummet in the polls. Again, that's why he will not debate DeSantis. So DeSantis, he's a powerhouse. I'd like to see him come out more aggressive. I'd like to see him more with the rhetoric of, Trump doesn't have the balls, the foot fetishes. I love it. I mean, I'm not saying that you've got to go all the way down to Trump's level, but I think the mark of a good leader is you also know when to flip that switch and go full-on drill sergeant and take the fight to them. We need more of that from DeSantis. And I think we're seeing it over time. But, yeah, to answer your question in total, I think DeSantis would go after these institutions. I think he would investigate them. I think the American people demand it by now. I think we're tired of seeing a corrupt FBI, the FBI that Trump empowered. We still have Ray there. The same FBI that supposedly spied on Trump under the Obama administration that Trump did nothing about. I mean, if you look at the things Trump talked about versus what he did, they are very different. They are very different. And that's what the cult of personality needs to wake up and understand that. Forget the words. Forget that you would be in jail. It doesn't matter. Hillary Clinton's not in jail. Okay? That was political prosecution right off the bat. But the fact is, Trump then turns around and calls people like Nancy Pelosi, Hillary Clinton, beautiful people. It's like, these are your enemy. Nancy Pelosi tried her damnedest to get you impeached, like full-on impeachment. And you're sitting there and you're turning around and shaking these people's hand. This is the enemy. These people want their agenda. These are the same people that wanted us strapped down to gurneys and forcibly injected against our will. These are the enemy of the Constitution. And you're out there praising them. I just find that to be, I understand that we should do our best to be cordial and respectful with the opposing political side. But there comes a time to where there's certain things that you just don't say and you just don't do. I don't see Trump as being an actual leader. I saw that Alex Shepard kid posted yesterday that he's going to prison now for 19 months for his role in the January 6th insurrection or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And I just look at this and I feel pity. I honestly feel pity for this kid. He said he was 19 when he did this. Where is Trump now? Yep. Loyalty to me is a big thing. Where is Trump? Mm-hmm. This 19-year-old kid is now a convicted felon, and he makes this post. He shows up to prison wearing a Trump shirt. That's how dedicated this following is to a man that attacked the Second Amendment, that pushes the Marxist agenda by encouraging the trans nonsense. He sides with the likes of Disney. He sides with the likes of Bud Light. He calls Ron a pedophile. This guy can't even answer, can a man become a woman? He's like, It's like, are you serious? Like, these are not marks of a good, effective leader. Trump is fence-sitting. Trump is scared. Trump is not the 2015 Trump that we remember. And so when a man loses his ability to lead and lead effectively, he needs to step down for the betterment of the country. And that doesn't mean that's Ron DeSantis. Now, do I wish it was him? No. I wish it was the likes of Thomas Massey or Rand Paul, 100%. But also, DeSantis isn't that bad. He's not the worst I've seen, where no candidate's going to pass a purity test. It's literally impossible. But I still support DeSantis.
I think, again, you say a lot there, and I don't disagree with 99% of what you're saying there, if I'm quite honest. I think there are failures that are all over the place with Trump. Brock, we'll get to you in a second here. I'll say this. First, when it comes to the debate, I think there is a part of when you're the incumbent, the de facto incumbent, and when you're way up in the polls, debate could only hurt you. So for the gameplay of politics, I would understand in that vein why Trump wouldn't want to do it. Now, for the person who wants the best leader and wants these two to slug it out, you're damn right I want him on the debate stage. And I also think John's right that it's more than that. I do think that Trump knows he doesn't have a good answer. Okay, dude, you said drain the swamp. What did you do? And the difference is the 2016 Trump was so effective because he is a disruptor. He comes in and says, this system sucks. And so we need to shake things up. And that's effective. People couldn't point to his sort of record and say, but you did this, because he didn't have a record. He was an outsider. But that's not the case in 2020 and 2024. Okay, man, if you had a problem with all this stuff, let's look at your record. And I think John is absolutely right. And I'm just going to take one issue because there's many issues we could talk about, but just the issue of corruption. To me, the best argument for DeSantis is he got rid of corrupt Soros DAs. What did Trump do? He put Christopher Wray in. He put John Bolton in. He put Bill Barr in. I mean, that's devastating. That is a devastating criticism. It absolutely is. I think if you didn't hear a word in the entire election cycle that DeSantis and Trump said, I think just looking at policy and record, that it is indisputable when it comes to that issue of corruption that I have more faith in DeSantis. Now, the problem is, I think the way in which DeSantis has ran his campaign, he understands that because so much of Trump is the charisma, it is the cult of personality. It's not the policies, it's what Trump represents. That he was this first guy, really, that was seen as a potential outsider that came in and threw a monkey wrench in this stuff. And he was unfairly attacked again and again and again by all the people that are a threat to this country. And that's going to be hard to overcome. If they were honest with you, I'm one of them, a Trump supporter. They were all praising DeSantis before DeSantis ran, and rightfully so. Here's the best governor in the country. He's the most like Trump in that he's an outsider too, potentially saying, no, screw the system. We're tired of this corruption, these DAs. We're tired of the indoctrination of our children. We're going to take the fight to them. Now, he did it in a more sophisticated way than Trump, but it's still, Trump supporters like that. That was like, yeah, that's good. I think DeSantis should have ran a campaign that was different. He should have praised Trump in one sense. He should have said, no one could ever take away from what Trump did. It was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. He fought this system against all odds, against all of this collusion from all these institutions in 2016, and he won. And whatever the reason, you could blame Trump or not, he lost in 2020. And I think that Ron DeSantis, have on the key issues are better prepared going into 2024 than Trump is. And we should have a debate on these issues, but I'm not going to get into the mudsling. I'm not going to, that's fine. We're just talking about these issues, but you're not going to hear me say I don't like Donald Trump. Even if he sits here and he criticizes me and he criticizes my family, whatever, that's him playing the game of politics. I ain't going to play that. I'm here to say I love Trump. I think the MAGA people are greater people, and it's a movement bigger than Trump, and I could take that torch and carry it to where instead of just disrupting, I could disrupt while simultaneously rebuilding. And that's where we're at as a country right now. And to me, that would have been the tack for DeSantis to take. Instead, I think DeSantis I still in my heart think that he is that guy. He is the guy we see in Florida, but he also realizes that he has to appease sort of the old traditional donor class of the Republicans, right? And so he has to there's corruption, but, and so it comes off, that's where I think John's right. It comes off as sort of wishy-washy, whereas I wish he would just be the DeSantis that we know from Florida, which is, have you ever seen Ron DeSantis deal with the media in Florida? He embarrasses them. And that's why I actually, up until that interview yesterday, I think DeSantis, the right move for DeSantis, get on every podcast you can. DeSantis should come to our podcast. Granted, we don't have a big reach. Should come on our spaces and let me ask him difficult questions. And I bet he'd crush it. I bet he would. I bet he would absolutely crush it. Because when he's being himself and he's not relying on people crafting a message for him, I think he kills it. So that's where I am with DeSantis. So that's why I think it's troubling. Instead of the DeSantis that I see that's because you have to understand, one of the things that Trump did for all of his boisterous talk, I think part of it's cowardice. I think part of it was people around him going, oh, Trump, you can't do that. You can't deploy the National Guard to stop these rioters because of norms. Think of what the New York Times would say. Think of what the Democrats would say. Oh, you can't just unclassify all this information because think of what the CIA would say. Think of what Chris Wray would say. And Trump was like, oh, okay. And DeSantis, it was the same thing. You can't fire these DAs. You can't do that. You can't attack Disney. Think of the norms. And DeSantis basically said, fuck you. Yeah, I can. And he won. That's what I love about DeSantis. That's the guy that I want running the country. But my question is, will he continue to be that strong-willed and have that bravado when all of these vultures are going to surround him from sort of the donor class going, yeah, no, we think you're good. If you just moderate it a little, if you just were a little more moderate on this, we'll see. That's the question for me when it comes to DeSantis. But yeah, I do agree in general with John that I think that Donald Trump, as the de facto incumbent, can't defend his record. All he'll be able to do is make jokes and say, I'm the big man, and DeSantis, if he's any credible debater, which I think he would be ready for that debate, would make him look foolish. So if I'm advising Trump for the game of politics, I'm like, yeah, dude, don't debate. Don't do it. Unless he gets way down in the polls and then he has to throw a Hail Mary. But let's get to Brock. I know I'm wordy. You've been waiting patiently. Go ahead, Brock. Let us know what your thoughts are.
Hey, John, Rob. Thanks for doing these spaces. I'm a real big fan of them. But, excuse me. I just don't think that Trump is he's just not the man who earned the adoration. Right now. He just isn't that man. But in terms with all these indictments going on, I just don't think he's going to see, or he won't see a second of jail time, at all, because he is the left's path to victory. If the left were to actually accomplish what they claim to, which is that prevent him from running, you would get the entire right plus probably a lot of people in the middle back in the only other legitimate candidate, which is DeSantis. And that would, and the left just doesn't want that. This is why I think the left wants Trump.
Oh, I totally agree. Well, the left wanted Trump in 2016. Hillary bit off more than she could chew, but that's who they wanted. That's why you saw all the media was like, oh, Trump, an interesting guy in the primary in 2016. Then as soon as he won the primary, it was full force, Trump's Hitler, he's the worst, blah, blah, blah. But that's what they wanted. These institutions want to control who the primary opponent is for the establishment. And I think it is beyond dispute at this point that the Democrats want Donald Trump because they understand that he's a big turnout machine for their base. What do they have to run on? What's Joe Biden? If you're a progressive, what's Joe Biden done for you? Nothing. He hasn't done shit. And so what you need him to run against is Donald Trump. Now, don't get me wrong. They'll try to demonize DeSantis in the same way if it was DeSantis. That's absolutely true. But yeah, I think you're right. Now, the question is, will they try to lock up Trump after the primary? Maybe. I don't think he'll go to jail. I'll throw out just a wild prediction here, and then we'll get to Keno because I know he wants to talk. I think I would not be surprised if it shakes down like this. Trump wins the primary, Democrats win the general election, and then they pardon Trump. And they say, well, because they know Trump's not going to run again in 2028, right? And they'll be like, for the healing of the country. And then what they'll try to do, what that does is then there'll be a bunch of rhinos in the Republican Party that'll go, yeah, we shouldn't be investigating Joe Biden. And we shouldn't investigate Hillary Clinton because, see, look what they did. It's time to heal as a country. It's time to stop looking into these corrupt politicians. I feel the opposite. If Trump committed crimes, throw his ass in jail. But throw Biden's ass in jail if he committed crimes, and every other politician. So I'm looking for the establishment that has so many criminals on both the Republican and Democrat side to try to find an excuse for, well, this is why investigations into all of us need to stop. So I think you're directionally right that the Democrats certainly want Trump to win the primary. The question is, after that, would they try to throw him in jail? I think the Supreme Court would overrule it and Trump won't see a day in jail. But yeah, that's certainly what I want. They'll turn up the fire after primary season, legally speaking. Keno, go ahead. I see you have your hand up. Go ahead if you have something to say.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Rob. Thank you, John, for hosting these spaces. They're actually quite fun, direct access to you guys in the audience, so thank you very much for having me. Real quick, regarding my background, I don't want to come off as shilling. I work with Dr. Karlin Bosenko. The group that she manages, we infiltrate and expose socialist, Marxist, communist activity within the school system and throughout the rest of the United States. This past September, now how's this relevant with DeSantis? I'm going to get to that. This past September, she infiltrated a socialist communist convention up in Chicago, and 400 people there were active Antifa members, and the other people in attendance are members of the teachers union and current teachers in grade K through 12 and also college professors. So getting back to the point of Florida here, it was basically a struggle session to basically circumvent Florida law, especially with the Parental Rights and Protections Act. because now we have like I am in the state of I do live in the state of Florida. DeSantis is my governor. I voted for him. I'm not happy with what he's been doing. The teachers at this conference we're working out ways to circumvent the Florida laws by doing Zoom in by zooming in teachers that are based in Seattle, blue states throughout the country to teach CRT and gender affirming ideology in Florida schools, which has now been deemed illegal. We sent this information to the DeSantis campaign, to all the media outlets, and they have blatantly ignored it. I voted for DeSantis to basically be the governor of Florida, not to further his own political career. And the fact that he's blatantly ignoring this data, Florida is screwed. It's going to go back to it being a swing state, and all the ground that has been made is going to be for nothing. And so,
well, let me ask you this, if I can ask a couple questions. Obviously, this is news to me, and clearly, without being able to check into this information myself, I can't say that 100% it's true, obviously, but for the sake of taking your word for it, do you think that DeSantis' inaction on this, and again, I stress, I'm not saying that what you're saying is accurate, but just for the sake of this discussion, do you think his inaction is because he just doesn't believe that this should be dealt with, or is it because he's too busy running for office?
all the above, in regards that I think he stretched himself a little bit too thin. His focus was he's running on the platform of wokeness stops at Florida. We're ending wokeness in the state of Florida. I'm like, if that's true, he will listen to like an influencer. Bear in mind, I am not one. I just work with one to get the information out there to set up media packets to the press. One of the seminars I infiltrated was autistic sex education. That was going to be on Fox News and Friends, but because of the Hunter Biden story, they brushed it off to the side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, So let me. This is just my gut feeling. Like I'll speak on this. My gut feeling. Assuming the information you're telling me is accurate, which it probably is. I don't think you would have reason to just make something up like this. I ran for Congress in a special election in 2019. I was basically a nobody. I ran an election because it was a special election. It wasn't a primary necessarily. It was in the most conservative district in Pennsylvania. So whoever won the Republican nomination was going to win the election. But it wasn't a primary because it was a special election. So we had basically 220 conferees that were the deciding votes. And they were the only people that got to vote who the Republican candidate would be. I'm some nobody that comes in, and the person who won the election was a guy by the name of Fred Keller. Actually, because of redistricting, he's now lost his seat, but he actually became the congressman from that district. As a nobody who took 10th place, you would not believe the amount of people that would hand me papers like, look at this, you need to deal with this if you get elected, look at this. And a lot of it is probably legitimate, and a lot of it's just kind of crazy people, and it's hard to look into all of it, especially if you're a person like DeSantis that at one hand is still the executive of Florida, but on the other hand is running for president. I firmly believe, it is my gut feeling, that DeSantis actually cares about attacking this woke stuff. If he didn't, he would have just paid lip service and not then actually went on to pass bills to challenge Disney and places like that. I think if this was just show to run for an election, there were other things he could have done that wouldn't have put the spotlight on him in a detrimental way for so many conservatives. Because there's an awful lot of more libertarian-minded conservatives that are like, we don't like what he did with Disney. That's the government getting involved too heavy-handedly. We don't like that he's getting rid of these DAs. So to me, that seems like, if he doesn't really believe that stuff, an odd way to take that fight when he could have just paid lip service. Given that, my gut feeling would be then that it's not that he doesn't believe in tackling this woke stuff, it's that his attention is directed elsewhere. Now, that could be a legitimate criticism if you're a citizen of Florida. He said that he would remain governor, but now he's expounding on his political aspirations by running for president. As a citizen of Florida, I would understand that. But as a citizen of the United States, I say go for it. I think if DeSantis feels that he is the right man for the job, that he could get this country, which I think is heading in a terrible direction, and he says, you know what I did for Florida, I could do for the entire United States. I'm not a believer in well, you just needed to sit there and wait your turn. That's what they told me, these assholes in Pennsylvania. Oh, you're very talented. You just got to wait your turn. We need you on the bench. Screw all that. If you're the best guy for the job, then run. And so I know it's frustrating, and it's just human reality that you can't juggle all of those balls at once. I would argue that, yes, probably DeSantis would have done more great things in Florida had he not been running for president, because to some degree, just human nature it is distracting. You can only do so much as one person. So I would forgive him for what I see that in Florida. And I don't know how this would make Florida a purple state again, if the people of Florida really like what DeSantis was attempting to accomplish, and they're like, oh, but he's failing on this woke stuff, so I'm going to go vote for Democrats that are woke. I don't understand how that would necessarily entail.
No, they're not going to vote Democrat. They're going to go Libertarian or go third party or vote for another guy.
I got to interject here. I sincerely disagree on this one. Number one, now, if we have an issue with a man wanting to, as you say, further his political career, quote unquote, my question to you then is, if that man is doing a wonderful job in Florida, as the voter turnout clearly suggests, because Florida is bright red right now, if that man is doing a wonderful job in Florida, I find it to be very selfish to say that I vote for him to leave Florida. I would simply, that man, say like Governor Greg Abbott was the exact the same. He's not as authentic. He's not as on the attack as DeSantis is. But if Greg Abbott said, hey, I'm going to run for president, absolutely. I support that. Why? Because the country overall needs a man like that in office for international affairs, because we sit here and we talk about these forever wars, what's going on in Israel and stuff like that. We need a man that's up there that's going to say, we're not getting involved. This is not our beef. This is not our issue. So it's not just one of these things. They do a lot of great things for the state, but they can also do a lot of great things for the country. But also, I don't think DeSantis would turn around and just hand Florida over to somebody else that's clearly not capable of running it, whoever the next replacement could be. But as far as furthering a political career, if that man holds true to the Constitution, is doing what needs to be done, I mean, do I have an issue with Rand Paul being a politician that's been in there for years? No, because he actually stands for the Constitution. The issue I take are these careers politicians that just bend with the wind and they don't have any principles whatsoever. That's the issue there. So I don't really agree with that, and I sincerely don't think that Floridians are going to let Florida turn purple. Libertarians right now, especially after what's going on in Israel, have really shown their hand. RFK running as an independent. Now, I just don't see conservatives, switching sides, be it centrist, and saying, I'm no longer voting Republican. But that also does come into play as far as who's going to run to replace him if he does get elected. So there's a lot of open-ended things there. And as far as like him not addressing your thing, he's surrounded nonstop by people always want to do interviews. So sometimes the information doesn't get to him. Tag Christina Pushaw. Don't stop fighting. Get his attention. Because I'm pretty sure, as Rob has said, he's already taken this fight to them. I don't see why he would ignore it now. That doesn't make sense to me. It's probably that he just doesn't know it's happening.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Is into to yours and Rob's points. I'm like, yeah, he is a very businessman. He has a state to run. He has a campaign to run. I'm not disputing that. It's like, but when you have information regarding the school systems in your state that's coming from a credible source, and hell, we even got the president of the American Library Association stating at this conference that she wants to turn libraries into socialist training centers for Americans' youth. I'm like, that's a red flag right there, as well too. So if you want to combat the wokeness in our country, you got, it's like, here's the information. Like, you do with it what you will, but yeah, like in terms of,
are they actually doing it? Are they physically actually doing it?
Yes, they are. We have proof.
Well, then, yeah, just keep forwarding that information. Like, don't back off. I wouldn't say it's because he doesn't care. I would say he just doesn't know. Just keep, tagging everybody that you can. I know Christina Pushaw gets really involved in a lot of stuff like that. Hit up Max Nordo. DM him the stuff, tag him, make him aware of it. If you cause a big enough stink, just like the old cliche saying said, it's the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Don't stop, man. Don't stop.
No, we're not stopping. We got a couple other things on the back burner right now. But the main thing right now, like the focus I'm working on, especially with the candidates, is like we got to take back the schools or dismantle it or defund Department of Education defund ALA, like that's where the focus needs to be as well too. It's like if DeSantis, Vivek, or Trump can do that, by all means, I'll support them on that platform though. But the information's out there, it's available. We got these people on, I can't say on camera. We got voice recordings of them saying that, and they've just been doing perpetual damage control after we exposed their ass. Part of my language, I don't know if I can swear.
You can swear. We're big boys. We don't care. So, listen, first off, let me say this. Even if there's disagreement here on exactly what we think is going on with DeSantis or what will happen in Florida and things like this, I commend you and anyone else that's actually taking steps themselves to expose corruption, to work with things on the ground. I have more of an affinity and more respect for someone who completely disagrees with me on who we should elect, but that's actually doing on the ground real work to expose sort of these corrupt institutions, particularly in something so important as the indoctrination of our children that's occurring. So I commend you for that wholeheartedly. I really do. I think John could speak to this if he wants, but I kind of talked about getting all this information. John's a bigger streamer than me, and John's, someone who's a businessman, and he's got a lot of irons in the fire, right? John, I'm sure you get emails and direct messages of all sorts of really credible issues that from people all across this country, and it's hard to run aground everything. And so that would especially be true if you're a governor and you're running for president. So I think John's right here. I think that my gut tells me that this is probably just I'm dealing with a million things and I get a million people emailing me every day and good people that are doing good work, but I just don't have time to run them all aground,
Yeah, I've been in that position to where, especially like veteran issues, you do everything you can to help veterans out there, and you're only one person. And I'll get emails, I'll get DMs, and if I don't respond to one, if I don't show an interest in one, then automatically I'm branded as, well, John just doesn't care about veterans. He only cares about what benefits him. And that's when I finally had to just withdraw from it all, because it didn't matter how much good you did. People would always villainize you for what you didn't do, even though you didn't have time, the bandwidth. I mean, I was broke, had no money. I mean, even when the following was at its peak and I had so many followers, I didn't have any money. I wasn't making any money. I didn't monetize my following. Shell Shock hadn't launched yet. So it was just one of those things that, like, when I was doing all the traveling to the VAs to expose the corruption, that was on my dime. I didn't have... Right? And then when the attacks started coming for John Burk being, he didn't pay attention to this, therefore he hates veterans, it finally takes a toll on you. So you know what? Fuck it. I'm done. If, I would host events at VAs to get veterans to turn up to file the complaints. Minimum would show up. It's like, if you don't care, why the hell should I? I'm trying to use my following to bring attention to these corrupted VAs, the issues that veterans are facing, the opioid crisis, all this other stuff. And veterans themselves didn't participate. They didn't give a fuck. Anything outside of social media, they wouldn't get involved with. So it's like, you know what? Until the community gets bad enough to where they finally say, we need to do something, then I'll step back in. But you get inundated with everything. And then the other part of it is GoFundMe's, for example. I had a guy like maybe a month ago, like tagging me in all of my posts on Facebook, promoting his GoFundMe to help sponsor a reunion for his. I'm sorry, this is just not important to me. This is not important to anybody. I'm not going to use my platform to sit there and push for these things. Now, if it's something that's just very important, I can understand that. But that requires me to investigate the GoFundMe, because I cannot sit there and put my word on the line, my credibility, if you will, and push a GoFundMe that is going to raise money that's not going to be spent on what it needs to be spent on. And we've seen this repeatedly happen in the veteran space with Wounded Warrior and all these other, these organizations say, oh, you send us money, we'll send you a ring or some dumb shit like that. And you start doing some digging, you look at their 990s, like, these people are on the take. So when I start endorsing that shit, my credibility goes out the window. And the reason I never did that is because once I launched Shell Shock, I was like, if people believe me and they know I'm going to be honest with them, I never lie to them, not intentionally. And if I do if I fuck up, I'll admit it. It's like, hey, I was wrong on this. But that's why Shell Shock was so incredibly successful and still is, because I told people, I have never lied to you. I've never made that my business. I've taken the beatings. But that's also because I know that people, even veterans, will fucking lie. And they will turn on you in a heartbeat. So of all the reports, the texts, the emails I get, that's not my job. I don't get paid to do that. But at the same time, like, DeSantis is getting that on steroids, So again, I don't think it's because he doesn't care. He's probably inundated up to his neck and all kinds of crap right now. And it's not making yours any less important. Clearly it is. I'm with you on this. I fully agree with you that these people that want to turn into these socialist breeding grounds, absolutely it should be combated in every means possible. But that's on you to get out there and spread and scream the message and, post about it, tag them, just basically harass the shit out of them until they at least acknowledge you and say, yeah, fuck off, we don't care. Or, hey, fair enough, we're going to take this up the pipeline. That's on you. It's about your level of dedication. So I understand it's disheartening. It feels like fuck. I feel like I'm fighting this uphill battle by myself. Keep screaming at the top of your lungs, and eventually they will freaking take notice. I promise you, they will.
Yeah, and it's something that it's periphery to this. I understand that John's reasons are different for like why he wouldn't support Trump even in a general election. We'll talk about that more after the primary, I assure you. But one of the things that I think John exemplifies there it's very important is sometimes, because the issues are so important, you have to basically keep plowing ahead, even if you feel like you're screaming into a void. I could tell you a little about me doing that in Pennsylvania here, but I think the even better example is Scott Presler. You follow Scott Presler, this guy every day is traveling across the country to swing states, setting up, tents and stuff to talk to everyday Americans. He's organizing people to go into inner cities to clean trash up every day. He's doing his best to investigate where are the elections we need to win. His focus right now is here in Pennsylvania on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court election, where if we don't win, Democrats will control until at least 2035, which means that they will make sure that elections are proffered in a way that Democrats will win national elections in Pennsylvania, a swing state, until 2035. That's how important this election is. Where's the RNC? Nowhere to be found. Scott Presler tweets out every day, it's been 201 days since I've reached out to Ronna McDaniel at the RNC. She won't get back to me. Now, if ever there was a person who had the right to be like, you know what, dude, you could take a break. These people don't give a shit about you. You're out there, working your fingers to the nub, trying to get these people to maintain power, and they don't care about you. In fact, they look at you as a threat, and yet he doesn't. He continues to fight that fight thanklessly every day. He's out there. And I like to think that I did even a small percentage of that, where I'm screaming into the void, where I'm talking to politicians in Pennsylvania, or I'm going to rallies and I'm talking to, people at the state level RNC and stuff like that. No one wants to hear my message. I was out there screaming in the void in March of 2020 to the Trump people in Pennsylvania. What are you doing with this lockdown stuff? They didn't want to hear it from me. And yet still, here I am arguing with people about here's why I would support Trump in the general. It would be easy. It would be easy for someone like you, Keener, to be like, well, listen, I give up on DeSantis because I did really hard work with people and I found this really important issue and DeSantis didn't pay attention to it. But in this specific case, I don't think, like I said, I think it's probably because he's busy and he is inundated with information. But even if not, I think you have to honestly ask yourself, if truly you're working for the betterment of your area and betterment of the country and the betterment of the children, sometimes it means swallowing your pride and saying, he's still the best guy for the job, right? And so DeSantis, in particular in Florida, if he doesn't win the primary, there's no doubt that, we need to keep fighting for DeSantis in Florida and keep fighting to make sure. And I'm not saying you're not doing that, Kino. I'm just, I'm just letting you know that, it's important work. And don't get discouraged. I think John's absolutely right. You just have to understand that sometimes people that are, that busy and are trying to do so many things, sometimes it's hard to filter in which is the really credible, great information that you need to be acting on and what is the sea of just sort of innuendo and people that are trying to benefit themselves and using you as a platform. And make no mistake about it, DeSantis will be in a position, if he wins the primary, there will be people employed, thousands of them, to look at every picture that DeSantis has ever taken or every article that DeSantis has ever shared and try to find out if some racist said something. Oh, DeSantis took a picture with this guy that one time we have on camera saying the N-word. So it's really hard in this point in a primary to necessarily talk to other influencers and things. If Ron DeSantis does our show, it has to be in the back of his head that, okay, Rob Noerr and John Burk, people are going to look into them. And if they've ever said anything that's vile or disgusting, they'll say, Ron DeSantis, why did you go on and talk favorably to these people? So, I try to give a little more leeway that probably, look, it's a gut feeling. It could very well be that DeSantis is grifting and he doesn't care about this woke stuff. That could be. My gut feeling says no, though. I think that the actions that I've seen show that this is probably more of an oversight and that he's inundated with information. Orange, I see that you wanted to speak. Go ahead. Do you have anything to add in this or any of the other topics we're talking about?
Yeah, what's interesting is I'm just curious your answer to this. If not for Trump, right, what platform do the Republicans run on? Because that party is so fractured in my view. I don't even know what that is. Like with Trump, you sort of know, like he's sort of, let's close our borders, strength through military. I mean, that Muslim ban looks pretty good to me now. I know it sounds racist, but it's like, he's like, you don't know what's going on there. He's sort of, I think Trump resonates with the average American who's not as into finance, into political theory. Just an average guy watching TV. He's like, look what's going on. The price of steak is up 50%. Your price of fuel is up 100%. He talks to the common man pretty well. He's not as polished as Ron, and I love Ron. I don't know how Ron overtakes him because somebody said this, it wasn't me. Ron is almost like the cover band, while Trump is still the tour regular band, right? And to what you said was accurate. Like Ron said, I love Trump, right? MAGA is the way. He doesn't run MAGA, but I can do it better. If he does that, Rob, I think he basically feeds that narrative that, yeah, Trump is still the Rolling Stones. I'm the Rolling Stones cover band for now, right? So to me, and Trump did the other thing, which was really interesting, which caught my eye because I wasn't into that. He said, listen to our media. They're pretty biased. And ignorant me, right? I had young kids at the time, and I was like, this is 2015. And I was like, what? I never even watched 1 second of MSNBC. I was like, oh my God, this is propaganda to the extreme. CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, at the time Twitter, Facebook, they were very left-leaning. Trump sort of exposed it. He did some good things. He was not a politician. So the policies, some he did well, some not as well. Did he botch COVID? Yes. I think he had so many voices in his ear that he didn't know what to believe. But I think hindsight 2020, he would have done it a little bit. He did say let the governors decide, but his narrative was iffy. I agree. But I'm just going to ask you guys, if not for Trump doesn't run in 2015. We have Marco Rubio, for example. Let's say he loses. I don't know if he beats Hillary or not. She was a really bad candidate. But I think Trump really buried her. What is the Republican Party's platform? Because I know what the Democrat Party platform is. It's open borders. It's free money to garner votes. It's the woke agenda. It's the Green New Deal. It's really disturbing. It's almost anti-Semitism now. But what is the Republican agenda if not for Trump?
If I could interject on this one, absolutely, very good question. I mean, it really is. I want to go back to the point that Rob had talked about as far as how DeSantis could take MAGA and say, MAGA's great. I'm going to take the torch from here, spearhead it. I disagree emphatically on this one because Vivek Ramaswamy's reasoning for running can be used in the exact same fashion as far as saying, look, if he is the greatest president, if he did this, why are you running? And you can say that I can do it better, but that's also acknowledging that, are you thinking that MAGA would ever accept a replacement? No, MAGA is Trump. Trump is MAGA. There is no differentiating those two. It's the same. It's one and the same. But to sit there and say that, I can do it better, I fully agree that's a great way of going about it. And you bring up a very good point as far as what is the GOP about. Trump spread the GOP initially about the wall, but that didn't happen. We never got the wall, but he was also fought back against by Republicans in 2016, 2018, which again did expose the corruption. Was it intentional? No, I think Trump fully intended to get that wall up, but we did have a lot of Republicans vote against it. Many of these same Republicans that are still in positions of power today, which again falls back on the voter ignorance. But when we talk about like where the GOP stands now, we are fractured. We are in disarray right now. But that's what happens when you take beating after beating after beating. We lost in 2020. We basically barely squeaked by a victory in 2022 in the midterms. I mean, if you can even consider that a victory, it was supposed to be this massive red tsunami. It fell drastically short. We were all, I mean, even myself, I was like, man, I don't like political prophesying because I feel like nobody truly knows. I mean, everybody, Trump loves quoting the polls. MAGA loves quoting the polls. The polls, the polls, the polls. The polls in 2015 had Hillary slaughtering Trump. Like it was like Trump should just drop out now. He was getting destroyed. But what did he do? He destroyed her instead. So it's kind of like, we are in such shambles right now because we've taken all these beatings. But now is a time that the GOP needs to reform. We need to come back and redefine what are our priorities. What makes what is conservatism? What does that mean? And I don't feel like we're doing that right now. But as long as we have MAGA, as long as we have Trump, this will never happen, because instead the Trump clown show, it's going to be about him. It's about the indictments. It's about all this other nonsense. It's why nobody wants to address DeSantis in his interviews about policy. Policy is what we should be focusing on right now, and nobody wants to talk, because the MAGA clown show wants to talk about boots. They want to talk about indictments. They want to talk about all this stuff, and it's just kind of one of those things of like, look, this right now, in these moments, should be when the GOP really starts to figure it out what the hell is going on. Who are we taking? What's our pathway forward? Trump doesn't have one. Trump goes up there, and I know you're talking about like the COVID being hindsight being 2020. That's still not a reasoning to justify when you make the wrong decision. And when somebody says, "Well, what decision would you make, John, if you had 20 voices in your head telling you 20 different things?" Just like I think in Christianity, what does the Bible say? Just like I think in politics, what does the Constitution say? And as long as you side with the Constitution, the people can hate you for your choice, but you adhere to the founding document. Therefore, you are not wrong. That's what the document says. Trump did not do that. And the other thing is, Trump will not apologize for it. So to think that we move forward and Trump says, hindsight 2020, Trump has still not apologized for the COVID lockdowns. He says he wasn't wrong. He claims to be proud of being the father of the vaccines, yada, yada, yada. Gives Fauci this presidential award and then says, oh, I give a lot of people awards. I didn't know. Bullshit. You know what you did. So Trump caved to the popular vote, or the popular voices that were screaming for COVID, yada, yada, yada. Trump caved. That's not a sign of good leadership. So as far as leading this party, I don't think Trump is that person anymore. I'm like 75% sure it is DeSantis. I do want to see this guy, like I said before, get more aggressive and do things and say things like he's been saying about Trump. But as far as where we go from here, my thing, I know Rob's is education. I can agree with that, but I think even more so right now, it's that southern border. We've got to close it. We have you talk about the Muslim bans that occurred from Obama, and they were a great thing. This is stuff that basically it's being ignored because for the sake of, nobody wants to be accused of being Islamophobic. But it's like, but then how many people have to die before we start acknowledging we've got Muslim terrorists in our country right now operating, and we've already been warned by the likes of the FBI not 3 days ago saying, hey, there's a higher possibility it's going to happen now. And it's just like that southern border needs to close, and Democrats are doing nothing about it. Now, I have seen that a lot of Democrats on these border towns in Texas are flipping and turning red, saying, look, we're tired of this. The DNC is failing us, and we're going to see more and more of that. Look at New York. New York, they're a deep blue state, deep blue city. What's Eric Adams doing? He's saying, we can't handle it anymore. Finally, once the taxpayers start realizing and seeing firsthand what Democrat policies bring them, they're like, wait a minute, something's wrong here. But in order for them to flip and change their vote, there must be a man on the opposing side that actually resonates partially with them. That's why RFK is so popular with conservatives. They sit there and they love this guy because he does say a lot of things in regards to COVID transparency they agree with. But if he would have shut the hell up about the Second Amendment, he wouldn't have lost me. But that guy's a gun grabber. He says all kinds of stuff like that. But if we can position somebody within the GOP to be there and say, look, if you want to vote for Republicans, it's basic horseshoe theory. Look, what do we really disagree on? Abortion, guns, and maybe a few other things. Nothing so major that we can't at least say, look, let's put these differences aside for the betterment of the country, and let's close this border because this is an issue now. I think people are waking up to that. But as long as we have Trump at the head of that party, this is not going to happen. I do not think Democrats are going to say, you know what, this sucks, I'm voting Trump. No, these are the same people that think Trump is literally the devil. Trump has said and done so much dumb things. It's like, I just feel like, bro, the mean tweets were great, but then it was like, okay, rein it in a little bit, show some presidential material, show some leadership. But instead, now look at him. Every day on Truth Social, it's a temper tantrum of some sort. It's blaming somebody else. When have you ever seen Trump actually personally take accountable for a fuck up?
No, it's
Leadership. If DeSantis, we were wrong, we reversed course, fair enough. Fair enough. I can appreciate that. But like somebody says, hey, I was wrong, I've changed direction. Absolutely. Trump ain't the guy. I don't feel it.
well, and like a lot of what you're saying, I think is true. I don't necessarily agree with everything. You know, to what Orange was saying, like, what is the Republican Party without Trump? Well, it seems that there's like two ways to interpret that question. There is, what would it have been without Trump in 2016? And I think even John would admit what Trump represented in 2016 was something that was needed. There were issues.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I will never take that.
Yeah.
I will definitely give Trump credit and kudos on that. He did usher in a new era of political opposition, if you will. But it was kind of like it definitely expired, and then we were given the likes of the Marjorie Taylor Greens, Lauren Boeberts, the Anna Paulina Lunas. It's like now we've gone too far in that direction. It needs to go back the other direction. Like, and I love our discussion, Rob. Like yesterday, this is not me saying we need to go back to the old guard.
Right.
I fully believe the next generation is stepping up and taking over the reins of leadership. The McConnells need to go. All of these people, they need to go. It needs to be replaced by more progressive GOP members that understand, like, look, we've got to make some concessions here in regards to the name of liberty, the name of freedom, you know, and I think they're doing that. But I also think that we need to get away from these boomer neocons. That Crenshaw came on the show once and he said the reason these people are needed in Congress is that they know how to play the game. That's fine, but that's also not a good thing. They know how to play the game. They know how to, like, basically rig stuff. It's like, this is not what we need. This is not what we need. The old guard needs to go.
Yeah,
So-
yeah.
so
If
my-
you were,
so- yeah, so my
if I
thing
can,
here is-
Orange,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I was going to say, what was the policy that you would say Donald Trump? What did Donald Trump represent? What is the Republican Party of Trump in 2016? I think the number one policy that you could point to and hang your hat on is the border. I think that Donald Trump talked about an issue that almost every conservative was deeply concerned about, and many independents and moderates on the left were concerned about that. And yet, the establishment Republican Party, up until that point, said that that was an issue you couldn't talk about. That was a loser. You had to just ignore it because the New York Times, you'd be called racist, basically. And Trump, that issue then led to what Trump was really all about, what he really represented to me. What he really represented to me was voiceless people in this country that are so tired of self-censorship because they feel that they'll be called a racist if they say what they really think, or they'll be called a bigot. And Trump represented on that issue of the border, which then expounded to so much else, represented, fuck it, say what you believe, right? That's what we need. We need people. And what happened, I think then there's a lot of good with that, right? But there's bad with that. And there's good and bad with any politician, don't get me wrong. Good and bad with every person, don't get me wrong. But you then say you're someone like a Thomas Massie or you're Ron DeSantis. In some ways, Trump paved the way for them. Not that they wouldn't have been politicians, but he made their voices magnified because it allowed everyday normal people to say, we don't have to pretend that we hate people that are looking for our citizens first. You know, now what is the Republican Party? Well, there's this sort of three-way war going on. There is the Trump, the MAGA people, that I will just generously say, maybe I don't have as much hatred for them as John, but for me, I'll just say this. What they represent is Trump. That's it. Whatever Trump says goes. What he says today is, and a lot of that I like because I like a lot of what Trump represents, but I also understand that it needs to be more than that. And that represents sort of an antagonistic approach towards the current establishment orthodoxy, which I like, right? Then you have the opposite. You have the Rubios, the Romneys, the Paul Ryans, the Mitch McConnells. They represent wanting to turn back to the old GOP. And what was the old GOP? Well, the old GOP was neocon. The old GOP was more interested in compromising with Democrats on the important issues such as foreign policy and never wanting to have any battles that could make them look bad domestically at home to be called a racist. So they didn't really want to fight on abortion, and they didn't really want to fight on the border, and they didn't really want to fight on indoctrination and education, and they don't want to really fight on censorship on social media and things like that. I hate that. I hate those people. I think those people need to be disposed of politically if we ever have a chance. Then you have a third group of people, which I think are sort of more moderate in between that. And that's where maybe you get people like DeSantis. Now, as much as I hate that prior group of people, I also understand I'm like in the words of the Joker in Batman, I'm not a planner. I'm more of a like, fuck these people. They've screwed over my people in my area of the world in rural Pennsylvania my entire adult life. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of them staying silent while my area of the world gets worse and worse and worse. We just want to be left alone. Leave us alone. But instead, we're constantly asked to sacrifice more. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of the corruption. I'm tired of what they represent. However, when it comes to winning, a strategic person understands that you can't just be like, F all you people. I can say that, but I'm not running for office, you know? And if I ever do run for office, then I'll have to deal with it. But I think I'm persuasive enough. I'll attempt. So I think that's where you find your DeSantis's. That's like, listen, we need to drag that old guard kicking and screaming into the new GOP. And what is that going to look like? Well, hopefully, and I'll make the pitch for DeSantis here, hopefully it continues Trump's trend, the Trumpian trend, the MAGA trend of saying we need to challenge these institutions that have not done anything for everyday Americans, and we need to focus first and foremost on Americans, not on foreign people, not on making sure that we're politically correct and stuff like that, but what helps Americans most. And that means smaller government economically. That means being fiscally conservative. That means protecting our borders. That means making policies for the interest of the people of the United States. And hopefully that means adhering to the Constitution and the limits there within. But also being willing to fight and not being afraid of these monolithic institutions such as the mainstream media that are going to demonize you because you came out and you questioned what academia is doing. And being willing to take the fight to them. And I think that particularly before he was running, DeSantis represented that very well. I think he had some of the most effective interviews with members of the press that tried to demonize him, where he put them on the spot and called them out. And I hope to see more of that, of him coming in the future. So to me, the question is, without Trump, what do Republicans have to run on? Well, there is a lot of that Trumpism, that MAGAism, that they could keep rolling the ball forward. But they would say, but there was bad stuff with this. Trump wasn't an ideologue. Trump was a fuck you type guy, right? You don't like me, then I don't like you. Screw off. You know, I don't give a shit. Either you're on my side or you're not, right? And that's good when you're on his side, but when you're like, hey man, what about these lockdowns? What about like banning bump stocks and stuff? All of a sudden, you get treated with the same hostility that the mainstream media that he's correctly demonizing is. So I think that's what needs to be represented. In the short term, what could Republicans run? I could run right now and not institute one policy, and still the average person would think my message is good. You know why? Because all I have to run on is look at how disgusting and despicable the Democrats are. Look at what they're doing. And by the way, that's how they'll win. Look at how disgusting and despicable Trump is. The difference is I'm right. You could see what the Democrats are doing. You could see how authoritarian they are. You could see how your pocketbook's hurting because of the policies that they've instituted. You could see crime rising. You could see fentanyl deaths going up. You could see the borders porous. You could see that we're leading towards World War III. Now, I want more, though. I don't want to vote for someone just because they're like, well, I'm not Joe Biden. I want someone that's going to be better. But I think that that's the message. You know, we talked about this a little yesterday, John. Someone was talking about it, like the economy. Why isn't that the central issue? It will be. Once the general comes around, like that's the most persuasive argument. Like, dude, this Joe Biden not only has been a disaster for the economy, but he's gaslighting you and thinking that it must be you if you think the economy's bad. Because it's like the strongest economy ever, dude. How about that, Jack? Now I'm going to eat some more chocolate chip. And people are tired of that shit. So, you know, I think it's a good question to ask, Orange. Like, what does the Republican Party represent? There's a war for it. You know, it's different than the Democrat Party. Theoretically, there's a war for the Democratic Party. You have this sort of corporatist Democrats that, you know, pander to the progressive left, but really they're just neocons in disguise. And then you have the like more progressive squad type people. But the problem in the DNC is they are very effective of shutting everyone up when it comes to actually doing the policy. Like, they'll whip everyone in line. That's how you could have Bernie and AOC be like, we don't like, Nancy Pelosi shouldn't be speaker. But then they'll reliably vote for her for speaker. They're almost always in complete lockstep and unison. They had their little mini civil war with the Bernie Sanders wing, and it failed. And it will continue to fail. The Republicans are the only party right now, whether it be through cowardice or fecklessness or what, that the leadership can't contain the actual voters that are actually putting people like Thomas Massie out there, or putting people like Trump out there, or Marjorie Taylor Greene, or Rand Paul. And I understand those people are different for a lot of levels, but trust me, the establishment Republican Party, they don't like any of those people. And so, that's, I think, a lot of people say, well, what about third parties? They don't really have a chance at this point. They don't. The best chance we have is getting people that care about the Constitution and care about Americans and will stop this corruption in the Republican Party in positions of leadership. So hopefully that answers sort of the question there.
Yeah, so both you and John sort of unintentionally maybe made my point. We're still running on what Trump sort of began, right? It's better economy, right? Energy independence, secure border, strength through military, right? Don't take crap from terrorists, right? And he's still running. He is still that rock band. He's still singing, I'll use a Kiss reference. He's singing Detroit Rock City as the live band. He's older. He needs the makeup to hide that he's got all those wrinkles. And I think that's the problem for Ron. He has to admit that some of those policies you said, Rob, you say, John, were good. And he started the trend, but I can make them better, which is what Vivek is doing. It's tough to do with Trump there. And again, don't forget, Trump was pro-economy. He was pure. I mean, I work in banking and finance. Never did better than when Trump was president. I'll be honest with you guys. What he did for the banking sector with corporate inversions, I don't want to bore the listeners here, was absolutely awesome. We did with the energy was absolutely awesome. He did great on that aspect. And I think that's why, to many, and again, I think Trump would be better off if he said, look, I'm getting older, I'm tired. I'm gonna give my support to you, Ron, and you run with it. I'm gonna be the kingmaker, not the king. What made him so good in 2016 is his negative. He's too much of a narcissist for that.
I couldn't agree more. As much as I say that I think DeSantis should have ran, I would say the same for Trump. If Trump legitimately believes I'm the best man for the job, to me, Trump would have been more powerful as a kingmaker in the Republican Party than he'll ever be as another president. I think that he could have left a legacy that would be truly remarkable, that he was the guy because, ask yourself this, like legitimately, and John, I'd like to get your thoughts on this actually. Who's more of a threat to sort of the establishment Democratic Party at this point? Donald Trump or Elon Musk? Who do you think? I don't know if John's still there. Maybe John can't hear.
Now I'm actually thinking. I've never been posed that question before. I would say the immediate threat I'm gonna say is Donald Trump, but I think that they have Elon in their crosshairs because the Biden administration has already targeted him for what's going on with Twitter. But I think both of them can be mutually true as far as the comparison. I couldn't tell you, Rob. I don't know. I think they're both a threat, quite honestly. But then again, I know Elon isn't as pro free speech as he lets on. He does put a lot of talking points out there that do resonate with Republicans, because I think Republicans right now, we're kind of like that beat dog. You just throw us some scrap, I love you, even though at core, this guy is not about free speech. But, I don't know. But I do want to go back to what you were saying, Orange, as far as like the policies that Trump had as far as what he was running on. Oh, there's no doubt economically, like every single one of us can agree. I think anyone that says that Trump's economy wasn't good just because they hate Trump, they're being intellectually dishonest. That's just a bad faith argument. We have to concede that, yes, it was an amazing economy. I loved it, bro. I mean, I'm not going to knock him. He did a great job. But then he burned it all down. So it's kind of like, I get you, man. We all excelled. And I am interested in hearing about those bank things you're talking about, because the finance sector is something that does interest me. I'm growing more into wanting to learn more about it. But,
So,
Let
me give you guys an example. I'll do a rudimentary example. It's not really apples to apples, but if you're not in banking finance, imagine you're building a house, right? And you're saying, and the town says your windows have to be 16 by 16. They have to be this color. They have to be measured like this, and we have to measure them 10 different ways before you can put one window in. That's how it was in banking and finance. We have to have so many compliance people. We have to do so many forms. Like if I'm dealing with a company that's dealing in jewelry and fine diamond. You have to do all this. Doing in oil, doing in equipment manufacturing, ISO this, ISO that. The costs the banks took and the companies took with all the regulations were so high that it caused delays. It caused some projects not to move forward. He comes in and he goes, you know what? You can use that window. You can be 16 by 14 if you want. You have to have examined twice. It would be like that. He made it so much easier, right? To where now, like, all right, we have all these handcuffs off. So again, it's not. I'm just trying to make it a common sense example of what he did in banking and finance. And now with Biden in place, all the forms we have to fill out to make a loan, is absolutely astounding to me. You guys
I do love the point you proved there as far as deregulation is what America needs more of, not more regulation. So when people went after when people went after Jim Jordan, it's like, what does he pass? It's like, dude, if he hadn't passed anything, I'm okay with that. The less action that we have in Congress, I'm okay with that, because everything the government, I know Rob's thing about academia being primary, a single issue voting thing. The academia issue, the inflated tuition, I was educating my girlfriend on this last night because she's getting more interested in politics. Is like the reason that we have skyrocketing academia or college tuition costs, it's the government. It's like the government goes in there, just like with healthcare. I'm not going to get into the weeds on this one, but it's like everything the government tries to go in there and fix, the causation was the government. The government created this problem, and for the government to say that I'm going to fix said problem, they only exacerbate and compound the problem. Hence why, I wanted to shift to this topic before I have to start the show, but Charlie Kirk comes out there, and I feel vindicated. Slowly but surely, I feel more vindicated because I've been pointing to people like the Kirks, like the Owens, like the Turning Points. These are griftist organizations. They are tied to Trump at the hip. They are trying to fundraise. They want to get close to power. They want to become the kingmakers. They want political candidates to have to throw themselves before them and seek their endorsement. That is the ultimate form of power. It ain't being king. It's being the kingmaker. Y'all nailed it right there. And that's what Turning Point, that's what Kirk wants to do. Whether Kirk's going to run for office in the future, I don't know. He'd be foolish to. I would just stay out of it and be in the position you're in now. But Kirk's tweet yesterday proved that Turning Point is not for small government. They are for federalizing the education system and keeping it federalized, because as long as Trump does it, it's okay. No, that's not true whatsoever. We don't need a federalized education system. It doesn't work. We've seen why it's been infected by the left. And to sit there and think that if Trump does it, that the same outcome cannot happen because it's Trump is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. So I'm glad Kirk tweeted that. I tweeted on my page. You can scroll down and you can find it. And this is just more big government shilling. It's more federalizing the issues. And the federalization doesn't fix it. In fact, it makes it worse. And if you look at the bullet points he talked about, he said free. Free is a four-letter word in politics. You're a banker. There ain't nothing free in this world. When you sit there and say, it'll be free. No, motherfucker. You're paying for it. I'm paying for it. We see free. Anytime the government says free, you better run. Run. And so when Kirk goes out there and simply for that, finally people are seeing these grifters and these liars and these conservatives that are, for what they are, they're not conservatives, they are liars. And that's the problem. They are not constitutionally based. Therefore, if they're willing to sell their soul to Donald Trump for saying, an invite to Mar-a-Lago, that Dom LaCour guy, that guy's just fucking crazy to me. Watch his pathway. Like, he blows up because he's like, so-and-so's next to be exposed. It's like, what are you talking about? But then he starts getting in at Mar-a-Lago. And now look what he's doing. Now he's kissing the ring. Now he's getting close to Trump. What's he going to start doing? The exact same thing that Jack Sobaseks do. The exact same thing that Candace Owens did. The same fucking thing. You are going to bow down to the throne of Trump. You're going to forsake your constitutional values. And you're going to basically go all in for Trump, all in and worship the man. That's the problem that we have. That's why MAGA needs to go away. We need conservatives that are actually going to stand for the Constitution.
Me next. Go ahead, Aftershock.
Let's go. Thank you, guys. I have like 5 minutes left. I'm at work right now. You guys need to do this a little bit later. I'd love to be a part of this a lot more. I'm listening while I'm working. But when you guys were talking about the requirements, I think it was the orange. I forget. I don't know if you're the full name. But the orange tiger. When you guys were talking about that, I have no idea what you get there. I'm too stupid for that. But I did want to hit on the points that you guys were making before, with the nationalized education, and go a little bit before that when we were talking about basically, taking on our own party. So the first one is, I do think, when you guys talk about the nationalized education that Trump, was speaking about, I haven't looked too much into it. Now, I agree that obviously, less government is definitely what we want. But I wouldn't necessarily, I think it's worthwhile to talk about the point of, right now the problem is that the left and the right are both, lunging for the government gun. Right. But the problem, though, is that the left is lunging for it nonstop. And the right is basically saying, come on, nobody should have it. Nobody should have it whatsoever. And I think that's putting us at a big disadvantage, because I think one of the biggest advantages that they have in the culture war is that they're trying to put their hands in everything. So I think it's a worthwhile conversation to have on whether we should explore those kinds of options. Like, why don't we have policies in place for education on, teaching children why the Constitution is great, why it was made, why the First Amendment is great, why the Second Amendment is great. Immigration, if somebody wants to come in here, they should fucking agree with the things that make them want to come here in the fucking first place. They should agree with the God-given rights that our founding fathers, originally gave to us, gave by God and protected by government, I think is how it goes. But or maybe in high school when you're a senior, why don't we train and teach children how to handle or not children, like high school, I guess they are children, but why don't we teach them how to handle a gun? Well, what exactly is necessarily wrong with that? And the second one, just because I do have to go, I'm sorry, I would stay if I could, but I think going back to the point of basically handling the biggest problem, in my opinion, and I think we're basically still in step one, which is very unfortunate and very blackpilling, but the culture war is all that matters. Anybody who tells you differently is either full of shit or a Democrat that knows the culture war is all that matters, but wants you to take your eye off of the prize. But it's all that matters, right? And I think we're still in step one of realizing that, and also realizing what we're up against. Like, you see people, and I have to agree with you, John, I'm shitting on fucking Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene, where they're out there freaking championing this supposed win on the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. But if you literally saw the first speeches that they gave, Hakeem Jeffries literally went off calling Republicans, Trump supporters, conservatives, every name in the book, extremists, insurrectionists. And then as soon as he gets off, what is the motherfucking first thing that Mike Johnson says when he goes up? He literally whispers to Mike Johnson, hey, I completely understand where you're coming from, and I will work with you. And that is just so fucking ridiculous. It just shows how spineless the fucking Republican Party is. But it goes to show just how these Republicans, because I'm not a fucking Trump loyalist. I used to be, but Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, I definitely have my eyes open when they dig their heels in on Mike Johnson and not wanting to basically criticize this decision that they made of like going for him, and then it turns out he's spreading fucking CRT talking points, and he's for the war intervention in Israel and fucking Ukraine, and they're afraid to fucking do that. And also, John, I know you speak a lot about Vosh, and I completely agree with you. It's one of the things as well that we need to see exactly what we're up against. I know you're talking about when Vosh was saying that do everything that it takes to win. Granted, that was an older video. I wouldn't be surprised if he still believes that, because just ask Rob. Vosh literally came out and said in the same video that he wants a world where Patriot Prayer members are shot out windows by lefties. In that same video, he also was basically giving the hypothetical of like, well, if you were in Nazi Germany, which we're basically in right now, what would you do to stop the Nazis? Would you engage in violence? And that's basically where he's at. But I have to grant him respect for it, because at least he's honest. At least he's fucking honest about it. Everybody on the left has been saying the right are Nazis, the right are, they're X, Y, and Z. Well, Vosh is basically standing up and saying, all right, motherfuckers, we've been saying this for years now, and now they might win. So what are we going to do now? And I have to respect him for it, even though I think he's a fucking disgusting asshole. he's at least got the balls to basically, cash his chips in after all the things that they've been saying, So I mean, yeah, that's basically where I'm coming from. I think we're still in step one, which is completely, really unfortunate. But I think we're on the right track here, at least, in laying the groundwork. These kinds of conversations that we're having, where we're able to call out our side. And yes, we're still in the infancy of this movement, but I think we're starting it off right, which is all that really matters.
So I'll just say this real quick.
I have to go, by the way, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Aftershock. Aftershock wins for the most curse words.
Rob, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Aftershock wins for most curse words per minute here, so that's good. Yeah, I mean, I there is a difficult question that we have to ask ourselves. At some point, you have to ask yourself, when do you admit that how much do you defend your principles if it means your demise, right? So at what point, for example, let's say that you're a pacifist, and no one here is, I don't think, but let's say you are, and you never think that physical aggression is acceptable. And so, people are breaking into your home and they're going to harm you and your wife and your child. At what point do you say, as much as it pains me to do so, I must forego my principles in this particular moment because it is the only step forward to ensure my own survival? It becomes a very difficult question, right? Because oftentimes what happens is people use that as an excuse to never be principled, to just say, well, if my side does it, it's okay. So this question of federalized education from Trump, I agree with John. I don't like it. I don't think that this is a good thing, and I think that it'll be abused. And if we set this precedent, I see no reason that once the Democrats come into power, that they won't use more of the same. Now, you may say, well, they're basically already doing it, and that's true, but I think this is a step in the wrong direction. I agree with John, and I agree with Orange. Can people still hear me? I hope you can. I agree with both of them that I think the step forward is deregulation. Instead, what we should be doing is those that are federally accredited institutions that are doing this woke indoctrination and things like that should stop receiving endowments, monies from the federal government, state governments, etc. To me, that's a better way forward, and I think that there needs to be a cultural push that goes with it that shows the days of needing to go to a four-year university are behind us. Take away the power where it really matters. Provide no incentive for people to go there. I truly believe within the next 50 years, we will see the university system almost completely replaced by individual tutors in real life and online that will teach people to have some sort of competency that will then lead to employers wanting to hire them. Because employers right now, you're a damn fool if you need an engineer and you say, well, I'm going to go and get an engineer from one of these Ivy League schools, because they're going to be entitled, they're going to be indoctrinated, and they're probably not going to be educated in the way that you would need them to be in order to have the position that you're hiring them for. So a degree means less and less. That's the direction I would go. But Aftershock brings up a good point. The counter to this argument is, let me give you another example, where we had fiscal conservatives in the Tea Party that routinely talked about the need to balance our budget and not to spend massive amounts of money. And yet, what did Trump do? Well, he spent at a heavier clip than Obama. But where was the Tea Party? Well, it was different when their guy was spending, not for me. But there are other issues where I think Aftershock has a point that the danger is that if you're unwilling to say, we're going to go on offense, then what happens is you have, I use Ron Paul as the example, because when I was in the debate community, all my friends, everyone in the debate community is a radical lefty. So they liked me as a Ron Paul guy because I was against the Iraq war, but that was it. And they were like, what you should, I remember my one friend told me one time, he's like, what you need to do? You and the Ron Paul people need to compromise. And I was like, what's the compromise? Ron Paul's basically like, we want the government to stay out of our lives as much as possible and us to live our own lives. And the Democrat policies, we think we should have total control over what you do. What's the compromise? To give them 50% control? Similarly, if you look at it in the Israel-Palestine conflict, if one side's like, we want you to be totally erased from history. We want you all exterminated. And the other side says, well, we want to keep this land and we want to, do this and that. What's the compromise? And so that, I think, is what Aftershock's getting at, that we have, when he says culture war, you might say, well, what is the culture war? And it's difficult to define exactly, but I think he's right that what we see is the left feels they are morally virtuous. They really do. And make no mistake about it, at the top level, the institutions, they don't care about left and right. They care about themselves and entrenching power. But they understand they could use the language and the actions of the left to justify their existence. Because it used to be that these powerful institutions were challenged by the left and challenged by the right. When you saw institutions that were no longer looking out for people, there would be a challenge to them from the people. But what if you could take the voices that are the most culturally significant, that affect the most of our entertainment, our academia, our corporate life, and have them all on the same page? Well, that's how we're here. We have a revolution that's top down. We have Nike that uses slave labor in China on the side of Black Lives Matter, complaining about capitalism, and all these lefties going right along with it, saying the real problem's poor people in rural America that basically are getting fucked over by our current system. Like, how does this make any sense whatsoever? And it's because of these culture war issues, because we've allowed the left to set the narrative, because the institutions see benefit in it. And make no mistake, if you're on the left and you think it's okay, you too will be lined up against the wall. You too, when you're no longer useful, will be attacked. It will happen. Many of these pro-Palestinian protesters are seeing it today. As soon as you no longer become convenient to them, they'll dispense of you. That's what's going to happen. So that is the war. And that, by the way, is a reason that maybe what Ron DeSantis is doing. The old school libertarian in me would say, maybe Ron DeSantis shouldn't be picking a fight with Disney. Maybe Ron DeSantis should just stay out of it when it comes to, woke teachers and stuff. He should just be silent on it. But where has that gotten us? When one side's playing for keeps and they think you're evil and they think that anything is justified against you, and the other side says, but we're principled and we don't think that we can have any aggression whatsoever. For me, it becomes immoral if you refuse to go on offense, and it will lead to your demise. And I don't mean your physical demise, though it could be that your life will be, taken. But if your livelihood's ruined, if you're a coal miner and they're telling you we're going to put you out of business, at that point, you should be allowed to use government to aggressively go after the people that are going after you. Not to lock them up or things like that, but to have policies that say, well, we're not going to send tax dollars to these institutions then. And so it does become a difficult, our greatest, I'll end this and then I want to give Kino a chance. Our greatest strength as right-wingers is also our greatest weakness. And that is, we want to be consistent. We want to be good people. We have self-introspection. We're willing to listen to arguments for the other side. The left doesn't care. All that matters is power. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're hypocritical. They don't care. On one hand, they'll cheer for the FBI to lock you up just because you're pro-life. On the other hand, if a pro-choice person firebombs a Catholic church, they would say, how dare the FBI arrest them? That's government aggression. They don't care about the contradiction because to them, all that matters is power. And at some point, if you have two competing sides, one that says, no, we don't think the government should have this power. We think that we should all be tried to kind of left to ourselves. And the other side says, we disagree. We think when it comes to us, anything is justified. But when it comes to going against us, nothing should be justified. It's clear. History teaches us which side will end up winning out on that. Kino, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, yes, sir. I'll be really brief. I just wanted to thank you and John again for having me up and allowing me to speak on the platform here. So I just wanted to say thank you very much, and you can remove the mic if you want, so if anyone else wants to speak, so thanks.
Go ahead, Orange. Thank you, Kino, by the way, for the kind words. I really appreciate it.
I want to add to what John said. John, you know why colleges are so expensive now? It's because there's readily available funds, right? So if anybody can get a loan now, the colleges will increase the fees, and they will just say, come apply. So my oldest, as you can guess, you can look at my profile where she goes. So, right, we have a small Sally Mae loan, right, because I want her to be responsible for some of the payments when she graduates, teach some responsibility. And she and I get emails almost daily. Hey, there's more money available, more money available, more money available. If you're not financially savvy, you're like, oh, yeah, great. I can get this money. I don't have to pay till I graduate. When you and by the way, so she's a business finance major, a marketable skill. One of her friends is a sociology major. They pay the same tuition. Actually, my daughter pays less because she got some money to go there. So these colleges can charge this much money because the institution is the fact that, hey, you can get that loan. And it doesn't matter what your major is. It doesn't matter how you imagine buying a house. You can have a job as a as an attorney who's been pressed for 10 years, or some kid out of college, and the bank says, oh, yeah, you can each buy the same house. That's not how it works. But for college, that is how it works. It's crazy. And part two, in institutions, keep this in mind. We elect our politicians, right? We all agree on that. The IRS, the SEC, the Fed, those are appointed positions. They're not elected. And those people make decisions that impact trillions of dollars worldwide. Trillions. And they are appointed positions. Jerome Powell is an appointed guy. I don't think he's any smarter or dumber than I am. And he's making monetary policy or opining on it or advising that is impacting trillions of dollars and people's lives daily. And I don't know how you change that, but that's one of the things that I liked about Trump. Initially, he came in and he was like, we have these institutions, and what's the oversight? The guy that runs the IRS, I don't know who it is, by the way, he's probably been there forever, and he's institutionalized, and both parties have to bow to them because those people aren't elected. They're appointed, and once they're there, try getting rid of them, right? You're almost beholden to them. And I think, just to my original point, I think it's going to be tough for Ron to dethrone Trump. Trump is still the original band, and he's running the same message. Ron's message is that I'm not as toxic as Trump, and I'll get things done. But an average Joe, Rob and John, the average Joe remembers 2017, 2018, 2019. My burger cost less. My gas cost less. I was pretty happy. I never had a higher savings rate. My mortgage, I get at 2.5%. They're not savvy enough to understand why those things happen. They just know it did. And Trump can maybe do it again. Ron hasn't done it yet. I think that's his uphill battle. And Trump has the charm and charisma to get people in the conservative media on his side. Again, I wish Trump would just step aside for the betterment of the party and the country. But that is his hubris. It could win him the election again because Biden is so horrible. But it could burn down the entire party too. It's going to be actually very interesting to see. And I say what Kino said. I appreciate you guys giving me the time. You're very generous, and others should speak as well. Thank you kindly.
Thanks, John. I'll leave you go. I'll just say this real quick. Your metaphors.
Yeah, I gotta go, man. I agree.
Okay.
I agree with what Orange said. I gotta start the podcast, man. Otherwise, I would love to stay, but I go live at 12 p.m. CST. So, but I would like to have one of these spaces on like the podcast. Rob, you said you're hosting it through a simulator.
Yes,
man. If we could do this in like podcast format, especially with the points that people bring up, this is like talk radio. I really enjoy this space. It's a lot of fun listening to people's educated opinions on this.
Yeah, John, I'll call you sometime in the week, and I'll show you how I went through it, and maybe you could set it up. And I don't think it's that difficult.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. All right. Got to bounce. Appreciate it, Rob. Thanks for all the people raising their hand and speaking. Always appreciate it.
Thanks so much, John. Yeah, John, great. Always, him being on here is how this is taking place. He obviously has a bigger reach than me. He has better ideas for this sort of stuff than me, so I'm grateful for him. We'll end it here soon because I do have to get running soon, but I'll say this, Orange. The metaphor you're using is very interesting of a band, right? So think of it this way. Let's say you're going to a concert, and there's some young up-and-coming guy, and he's going to be the next Jimi Hendrix. He's just shredding it on the guitar. Just absolutely killing it, right? And he's the opening act. And then the main act is like, Kiss, and by any metric, the opening act could play every Kiss song on guitar better than Paul Stanley or whoever's playing guitar, for Kiss. Just by any metric, if you just heard it and you didn't see the performance and you just heard, and maybe they're even a better showman, like they're dancing around more and everything, but Kiss is still that name. That's why you're there. You're there because this band right now is the most talented. You're there because they build up this reputation and that name, and you respect what they did, and you have this nostalgia and this feeling, right? And so it doesn't matter that technically they're not the most talented. But what if we switch that metaphor, and what if we say, but that's art, and art's just who do you like? There's not a winner or loser. What if we switch the metaphor to sports? Right? And so what if we say right now, for example, like, I don't know what sport to take, like we'll say football, right? And you take a team that's got like an excellent quarterback, but maybe he's not really well known. So last night I watched the Steeler game. You got this guy, Will Levis. He's a rookie quarterback for the Titans, right? And let's say you could have Will Levis start the game that you need to win, but instead, what if 60-year-old Joe Montana would come out of retirement and play that game? Now, more people would show up to see Joe Montana. People would go nuts. What? Joe Montana is starting this Monday night for the Tennessee Titans? He'd get crushed. He'd lose. He's not the best man for the job.
What if it's Tom Brady, though? Because Trump is in Montana. He's still sort of in his prime, he thinks. What if it's Tom Brady coming out of retirement?
Well, that's
He's retired, right?
Well,
he's past his prime, but he could still play, you think, right? So
well, that's the question. But that's the question, right? So the question is Trump Tom Brady or is he Joe Montana? That's the question. So me wanting to win, I would say, all things equal, if Will Levis and Tom Brady provide the exact same chance to win, I take Tom Brady because I get an equal chance to win and there's all this history to it. But if Will Levis is slightly more favored to give my team a chance to win, I take Will Levis. I respect what Tom Brady has done, but I want to win. That's the most important thing, right? So I think you're absolutely right that people look at it more like the concert metaphor. They look at it like, great, the up-and-comer guy, great, looks great, awesome. Can't wait to hear him for years and years and years. But right now, my heart is with the old act that I fell in love with when I was a teenager, and I've listened to him for 30, 40 years, and that's what I'm going to stick with. To me, that's how people view politics. It's like, Trump got me into this shit. Trump was the dude that spoke to me for the first time ever. Trump was the guy who's been maligned and attacked by every one of these institutions. I'm going to stay with my boy. For me, I totally understand why people do that. And I acknowledge the reality that millions of people will do that. They will, right? But for me personally, I'm just playing to win. Trump, I love you. I love what you did. I think you made a lot of mistakes. I criticized you when I should have. My decision on who to vote for going into 2024 for that primary is based solely on who's going to dismantle these institutions that are corrupt. That's it. And it may be Trump. Trump might be Tom Brady. He might be the guy that's the old veteran that still's the best one for the job. But he might be Joe Montana. He might not be able to do it now. I don't know. That's the decision I'll have to reach. But I think that that's your metaphor of the band. I hadn't thought of it that way. You know, the metaphor I use, because I'm a nerd, was professional wrestling. You know, I've recently been watching like a lot of 90s professional wrestling because that's the only era I really liked as a near 40-year-old person. And there are all these undercard people, particularly in groups like WCW, where it's like these lucha libre wrestlers that by any objective metric were just phenomenal wrestlers. But they didn't talk on the mic. They weren't the names people were coming to watch. You had fun when they were on the screen, but you're there to see an old washed up Hulk Hogan. That's what you were tuning in for. This dude that barely ever wrestled, he just lumbered out there and was like, listen here, brother. Like, and it's like, who was a better wrestler, Hulk Hogan or like, you know, one of those young guys? Well, clearly the young guys. But it didn't matter because people wanted to see Hulk Hogan had, since the 80s, he had infatuated people. So, you know, I do think that that's interesting, you know, how we look at those sort of things. So, but anyone else have any quick final words? And then I'm going to end this space. I do thank everyone for being here. We're going to try to grow this space. I know there were slightly less people than previously because normally John hosts it, not me, and John just has a bigger following. But I appreciate everyone that joined in. I really do. So if anyone has any final thoughts, we're going to wrap her up here in like 2 or 3 minutes. So Orange.
So Rob, you're the NWO. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was more. You know, I actually was more of a WWE. I liked The Rock when he was the corporate champion. That's when I started watching wrestling. But yeah. All right. But like looking back, it's funny the metaphors you could come up with. But yeah, that's how I see it. And you know, my goal is for those listening on this space. I like John a lot. And listen. Like, I truly mean this. Like, there are differences you can have with people politically. I have friends that are incredible left-wingers. And I'm not bullshitting you when I tell you I'm excellent friends with them. I'm the type of person that learned that disagreements and arguments, even on important things, don't subvert personal relationships, with few exceptions. Like, I'm not going to listen to you tell me that we should sexualize children. Sorry, deal breaker. You know, I'm not going to listen to you tell me that, you know, third trimester abortion should, you know, or something that should be celebrated. Nope, sorry. You know, but sans those sorts of things, you know. And if I could do that with a lefty, then certainly a right-winger that says something that I think's foolish, that says, look, if Trump wins the primary, I won't vote for him. I think that's an incredible mistake. That doesn't mean that I can't be friendly with John or really enjoy working with him. I do. But my goal coming after this primary, if it shakes down that Trump wins, is going to be first and foremost trying to convince people that didn't vote for Trump that they should vote for him in the general. And if it's DeSantis, my goal is going to be trying to get people that didn't vote for DeSantis in the primary to vote for him in the general. I think that as little of a chance as there is to overcome the massive amounts of corruption that's going to take place going into the 2024 election, there is almost no chance if those two sides can't come together after the primary. I don't give a shit that they talk shit on each other. I think it's stupid, a lot of it, I'll admit. I think that more dumbness is coming out of the Trump side than the DeSantis side, but I see the dumb shit out of the DeSantis side as well. I do. You know, I don't care. I'm the type of guy that John could be on here and call me a fat fuckface right now, and then tomorrow I'm still like, yeah, we're still pushing for the same thing. That's okay. Like, it's maybe not ideal, but that's how I look at it. So that's what my goal is going to be going forward. And I know there's an awful lot of people in John's community that are sharing John's belief, like, well, we're not going to vote for Trump if he wins in the primary. So, you know, that's where our biggest disagreement is. But when you listen to us, clearly our disagreement is on strategy, not on our goals. We have the same goal. We want the country to go in the same direction. We acknowledge the same harmful things that are happening in the. So for me, it's definitely worth working with people like that, and it's definitely worth, you know, arguing. And maybe John feels the other way. Maybe John feels so strongly that Trump would be such a mistake that he needs to convince me, you know, that we need to not. And I'm more than willing to have that discussion. So thank you everyone that participated today. I know we didn't talk a lot about the ballot harvesting and federalized education, but you know, that's what makes this space excellent. I think that we could go the direction that the audience goes. We can go to the direction that John and I in the middle of our conversation. So this space is really about increasing participation. So special thanks to Brock, Aftershock, Orange, Surian, everyone that contributed. If you're listening and you feel like, oh, these people, you know, they're somehow more qualified to me to speak. That's not true. It's not true at all. The entire point of a space like this is to make sure that people, regardless of their level of involvement in politics or their knowledge, have a chance to get their say. So even if you agree or disagree with us, it doesn't matter. We encourage people speaking up. People get tired of my long-winded rants, of which I'm on one right now. So it absolutely helps to have people talk, and I appreciate all those that did. I also appreciate all those that just listened or retweeted. It really means a lot. From the bottom of me and John's heart, we really do thank you. So I'm going to go over to my channel here for a couple minutes, then I'll be ending. You could also go over to John Burk's channel. He's starting his podcast right now, so you can check either of those out. But thank you all so much. Tune in next week, Thursday, 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern time, and we'll be doing it all over again next Thursday and Friday. Thank you so much, everyone. As always, have a good one. All right. We did it. Okay, so I'm not going to keep you guys on. Thank you, everyone on my channel, too. I will apologize for this. Oftentimes, when I'm doing a debate or I'm doing a space or something like that, my chat gets lost in the shuffle, so I do apologize for that. I'm not trying to be rude to the people that are typing in our chat, but it's difficult for me to like try to really listen to the people that are talking and things like that. And that was the first time that I officially hosted, so there was a couple technical things like granting people speaking positions and stuff like that that I had to work through, but I think it went pretty well, so I'm happy technically with how that went. I know it wasn't as big as the previous shows that John and I have done, but that's okay. So moving forward, we'll see if John's going to host or I'm going to host, but I'll make sure you all know as that's going on, because I'll be going live as that's occurring. So, but yeah, I thought it was a good discussion. I would love to start. I know I said, Rafelkas, I'd like to talk to you again. I would love to talk to you, but I do have to get moving today. That's why I honest to goodness, I have to apologize for eating in front of people. I hate when I'm debating people and they're sitting there eating and stuff like that. It annoys the crap out of me. It's not like something that I'm like yelling at them about, but I always just kind of like roll my eyes. That's the first time in years and years of streaming that I could ever recall, other than my 24-hour live stream, because literally I'm here 24 hours, that I've eaten on camera. So I do apologize for that. But the whole point is that I'm going to end this and then we're leaving. And so, unfortunately, I had to eat in front of people, so I apologize for that. But tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern, I'm supposed to be talking to Counterpoints. I will just give you a little insight in where my life's going to be here for the next month or two. So literally, as I was streaming there, I got a message that one of my coworkers apparently is no longer with the company, which means that I will be working a ton of overtime. So I'm going to try my best to keep producing videos, my own streams, working with other people, trying to do debates. I know I'm supposed to be starting this TikTok invasion stuff. There's also a lot of stuff that I want to work with Scott Presler and doing real world on the ground stuff. So I got a lot on my plate coming up in addition to sort of increased workload that's coming. So you'll forgive me if the streaming declines a little, but I'm planning on it not to. My plan is to keep plowing forward. So hopefully it works for all of you. But thank you. I think it was Dex. I heard the thing. Thank you so much for the donation. Your financial donations to me are incredibly appreciated. I know everyone's having a difficult time economically right now. If you can't give money, absolutely, totally understand. There's other ways you could help the channel. Retweets. You could, message people about me. You could clip my shows from, you go on Twitch and you can find easy ways to clip it, or on YouTube, easy ways to clip it and put tweets out and things like that. I appreciate all that. And I even appreciate the people that disagree with me or the people that are passive and just listen. I do. I appreciate you all. Who am I to deserve anyone to be listening to? So, thank you all so much. All right, with that, we'll find real quick if I can find someone to raid. EOD, you going live? We'll raid you if you're going live. It won't be a big raid or anything, but I hear my man crying downstairs. All right, he's having a rough time, I hear, so I'm just gonna raid my brother. All right, he's having a rough time, I hear, so I'm just poor guy. All right, this is my brother that we're raiding. He's playing Age of Empires. He doesn't really do political stuff. He's nowhere near as cool as me, but all right, we'll get you out of here. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. Enjoy this raid of my brother playing Age of Empires. Thank you all. I should see you tomorrow night. Look for me around 9 p.m. Eastern time. I'll be talking with Counterpoint. So thank you all so much. All right, we'll see you. And as always, have a good one.